and has managed street tree planting contracts in Queens, published peer-reviewed research on the benefits of the urban forest, managed large contractor forest restoration work, and served as the Director of Forest Restoration and Director of Natural Areas Management prior to obtaining her current title. Sorry about this. Christy holds a BS in biology from the College of Charleston and an MA in conservation biology from Columbia University. She's an ISA certified arborist, a certified ecological restoration practitioner. Please join me in giving Christy a warm welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna try it. If it flops down, that's okay, because I'm short. How's that? Can you guys hear me? Great. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. This is how we do it at New York City Parks. I'm looking for a hearty good morning. I'm so thrilled to be here. Again, I'm Christy King. Is it not loud enough? Oh. I'm Christy King, Chief of Natural Resources, New York City Parks. As Millie said, I'm so thrilled to be presenting to you today. These slides that I'm going to go through are going to have a bit of a different flavor than what we've heard so far. I'm going to talk about how we work with people in New York City to care for our natural areas. And first, I'm going to start with a bit of an overview. This may be surprising to many folks. I'm just going to hold this. This is not working out. New York City is 41% green. That is surprising to many people that live in the city and that live outside of it. The reputation of New York City is the concrete jungle, you know, and it's true, 60% looks like this, but we also have a lot of beautiful landscaped areas such as this, I believe, in Central Park, and then 12% of the land cover, this is like from a bird's eye view, is natural habitats. This is spontaneous vegetation regenerating on its own accord. And then within that 12%, we have a significant number of forests, wetlands, and grasslands. This, again, is from a bird's eye view. This is not all that New York City Parks manages, but we have over 10,000 acres of forest, 6,000 acres of wetlands. That includes both tidal marsh and freshwater wetlands, and then 4,800 acres of grasslands. Again, surprising to many people. A lot of this is owned by New York City Parks, which I'll talk about, but we also have the National Park Service is a major landowner in New York City because of the Gateway National Recreation Area and all the salt marshes of Jamaica Bay. So where are New York City's natural areas? As you can see, they're in the outer fringes of the outer boroughs mostly. We have large flagship parks in the Bronx, Queens, and Staten Island that contain significant natural resources. So here you can see the light green is parkland, and the dark green is our natural habitats. So we have New York City's largest park is Pelham Bay Park. Soon to be surpassed by Fresh Kills Park, which is a former landfill on Staten Island, primarily grassland habitat. Van Cortlandt Park, some of you might be familiar with. And then out in Queens, Alley Pond Park and Flushing Meadows Park are anchors of biodiversity and natural habitat. So this is a forest in New York City. This is what our forests look like. Kind of surprising, right, if you haven't been. This is in Van Cortlandt Park. You can see a multi-story forest with interesting topography. There's rocky outcrops here, really not unlike something you would see here in Westchester County. Here is one of our incredible coastal grassland habitats. This is in Marine Park in Brooklyn, where we have our largest coastal grassland. Shrubland woolly, this is a type of forest. This is a rare ecosystem in New York City. It's not that common. It only occurs in a couple of places. And I'll just mention briefly that New York City is so interesting. You know, we heard talk of the Lower Hudson Prism and the New England region. New York City is really at the edge of the Mid-Atlantic Mid-Atlantic and the New England region. So we have kind of habitats indicative of 2 large ecoregions in our city, which actually creates an incredible biodiversity because there's species found in New England and there's species found in like the Mid-Atlantic, say even Maryland, maybe as far south as Northern Virginia. So we have a lot of biodiversity in New York City. Our wetlands are also incredible and surprising. There's 850 acres of freshwater wetland, many of which are forested. We have 66 miles of streams. There used to be hundreds of miles of streams in New York City, but many of them were buried for sewer control, et cetera, and development. And then we have over 1,500 acres of salt marsh. This is, those are what New York City Parks owns. Our natural areas also look like this. So yeah, this might be more indicative of a presentation on invasive species management. This is in Pelham Bay Park in the Bronx. You can see signs of former land use. See the street sign there in the foreground. Kind of an interesting history of patchwork development of many different flavors in New York City. And sadly, a lot of situations like this where we have a vineland that has overtaken a canopy gap. There probably wasn't even a canopy gap there before, but a storm brought down a tree or two, the vine started to spread, and as you can see now, they're climbing up the fringes of the remaining standing trees, and this is just like waiting to expand. So this is a situation we deal with a lot in New York City. Is this a forest or a natural area? Weird, right? It's like an old compacted mugwort field with some former dumping on it. We actually do restore places like this, attempt to be native habitats. It's a lot of work, I'll say. I'll talk about some successes and failures during the talk, but previously in New York City, especially during the Million Trees Initiative, which lasted from 2007 to 2017, there was a goal of planting 1 million trees in the 5 boroughs of New York City. Most of those trees went into natural areas. They're smaller trees, you know, you can get the numbers that way. It's a little bit easier. So we would view something like this as a potential forest, potential canopy cover. But as I think we know, it can be really complicated to convert one land cover type to another when degradation like this is present. So I'm a member of the Natural Resources Group, a proud member, the proud leader of the Natural Resources Group. We have existed as a municipal conservation organization since 1984. So this year is our 40th anniversary, just a little bit younger than me, and we're embarking on a year of celebration of the work that we've done over the last 40 years to care for natural areas in New York City. Just a little preview, we're planning to have a conference celebrating nature in New York City at the New York Botanic Garden on September 20th, so mark your calendars, it should be really cool. Anyway, we've been around since 1984 and have a legacy of caring for natural spaces. We were first founded under former Commissioner Henry Stern, who, you know, you can imagine, he was a bit of like a Robert Moses type figure, like a larger-than-life personality, and in his office in the Arsenal, laying out big maps, and there's all these places in the park's maps that say undeveloped, and he's like, what is this? What is this undeveloped stuff? So he hired a team of scientists and ecologists to go explore the undeveloped parkland in New York City, and they found a lot of really cool stuff, rare species, ancient trees, hundreds of years old, really cool biodiversity, some like untouched habitats, you know, as best as we can get in New York City. But then they also found degradation, decades of dumping, and then starting in the 90s, we started applying for grant funding to start to fix some of these problems. And the first projects were really about removal of debris and garbage and installation of fencing to protect the natural areas. Very different approach than we take now, but that was some of our earliest work. And also we've received funding over the years through natural resources damages in New York City, like oil spills in the Arthur Kill and the New York Harbor, that have funded our work restoring wetlands. So many, many years of restoration, care, and this is a picture from Million Trees when we planted 1 million trees. This was from one day in the Rockaways where we planted 20,000 native trees and shrubs in a single day. And that was after 4 years of site preparation and management. So here's a little bit about our mission, just so you understand more where I'm coming from. We protect natural resources. We provide information. We provide technical review to projects that Parks takes on, as well as projects that other agencies take on. We find that a lot of infrastructure runs through our parks, and when that infrastructure needs to be upgraded or maintained, we are often at the table to advise on how that could happen and how we might get a betterment for our natural resources out of a project, like, say, a water main replacement. We conduct ecological restoration. That is really like our largest impact, I would say, is we directly build and restore natural habitats on parkland. We have design, construction, capital projects. We work with volunteers, and then we maintain over time. And then, using a bit of a more gentle word, we care for our natural resources. We work with people to do that. We apply data to inform our priorities. So that's who we are and what we do. And we also oversee, it's mostly an internal parks program called Forever Wild. It's a policy that protects the natural areas in New York City. That's kind of the theme of what we're celebrating this year too. Just yesterday, this is internal to parks, so maybe you all don't care that much, but we relaunched the guidelines for Forever Wild. We did that on the first day of spring, and you know, Parks is a huge agency. There's like over 3,000 employees. I think that's 3,000 permanent employees, and then we grow greatly during the summer season. So sometimes we can be our own worst enemy, and we produce these guidelines to give a set of best practices to folks in different divisions of parks working across the city about, it's like do's and don'ts really, how to work within and adjacent to natural habitats when you're doing things like basic park maintenance and management. So lots of guidelines for like where not to put horticultural waste and salt piles and things like that, you know. So anyway, this program really was born out of some legislation to protect special places in New York City. The earliest legislation was in 1928. I believe that was to designate the Thomas Pell Wildlife Refuge that is in Pelham Bay Park. It's one portion of Pelham Bay Park. So we have a few like legislated natural areas. I talked about the establishment of the Natural Resources Group. The guidelines were first published in 2001, and then we began updating them in 2018, really just bringing them into the modern era using remotely sensed data and, you know, GIS mapping to, before it was kind of like drawn on a map by hand where these places were, but instead now we went and did it all digitally and got the boundaries right, and so it was kind of like a technical refresh as well as an addition of places that we found had been covered by natural vegetation cover for a long time but weren't protected. So that's Forever Wild. And I talked about management. So, you know, I'll just like cut to the chase. The message I want to give you right here in these next slides is that we know what we're doing. Like, we've been doing this for a really long time, and if anyone wants to talk in incredible detail about the technical nuances of restoration and management, I'll be here until noon or whenever this thing ends, and you can always email me later. So over the years, since we started collecting data, we've restored over 850 acres since 1991. We generally, on an annual basis, we manage 1,000 acres of natural areas with staff and volunteers. That's out of 12,000, as a reminder, so prioritization becomes important. I'll touch on that in a minute. And then since 2007, the beginning of Million Trees, we've planted almost 1 million trees and shrubs in our natural areas. So every season, every year, we're out there doing this, and we know a lot about it. We've produced publications about it. This is something we lovingly call the cookbook, but it's guidelines for urban forest restoration. It came out in maybe 2013 or 2014. You can find this online. It's on our website. This is a real nuts and bolts guide that may be helpful for you all about invasive plant management, native species planting, lots of case studies with different nuances that might be applicable to some of your projects. Definitely check this out. You know, it's like a little bit dated at this point, 10 years old or so, but still really proud of it. A lot of the methods we describe here are the way we still do things today. We later have published the Forest Framework for New York City. This is less technical and more about prioritization. This came out the year I had my daughter, so it's like my second child in a way, and we work with our partner, the Natural Areas Conservancy, they in 2013 and 2014 collected ecological assessment data across all of our forests. It was a very scientific analysis, plot-based, incredible amounts of data collected. We boiled all that down to a matrix of health and threat to be able to compare one section of a park to another, one forest to another, and prioritize our work. So in short, I'll just tell you that this has, the information we found here has led us to prioritize forests that are high threat and high health. So a high health forest, a very healthy forest, has a lot of mature native trees in the canopy and the mid-story. There will be native species in the understory, but you're seeing those invasives come in. So we really manage at like a landscape scale, several acres at a time, and we pick our, sections to work based on those things. So we want to protect the places that are healthy but threatened. Then when we need to do large scale restoration, which happens for a number of reasons I can explain later, we look at more degraded forests that might be low health, high threat, where it's like really an opportunity to start over. Like if we have a funded project to plant, lots of trees, we want to look where there aren't really a lot of canopy trees and restore a gap to try to increase connectivity between forest patches and remedy like a situation like I showed you in that Vineland photo. So anyway, this was a really powerful document. It's also been used for advocacy. We married the information about forest condition with historic management records, because we know we have so many management records. We can talk about that if you want, Matt, but we know how much it takes, how many people and how long it takes to perform different levels of management. So we married that with condition information, and obviously, like we said this morning, the trickier sites require more of an investment, they're more expensive, but this really allowed us to say how much money we needed over a 25-year period, to manage everything. We're not doing that now. It hasn't been funded. This has not been funded. I don't do advocacy, I'm a city employee, but our partners do use this as like, well, the city said that they needed these resources to manage the entire forest, so here's what they need, So it's been both helpful on a staff level with picking work areas and knowing what to focus on in kind of what can be an overwhelming place, but also our advocates use this to kind of say, like, look, we know what's needed, this should be funded. Maybe no surprise to you, but we produced a similar document about wetland restoration. This is a bit more of a policy document. Wetland restoration is a lot more complicated than forest restoration because it usually involves removal of historic fill. The coastlines of New York City have been filled in over the years for development, but then some of those places were laid fallow and are now parkland, but they're parkland full of rubble, and so most of the wetland restoration projects that we take on are super expensive capital projects where we remove historic fill get rid of it, or we try to use it on site. That's a whole other story. But and then we regrade with sand to create tidal elevations that are resilient to storm surge and sea level rise and can support salt marsh grasses in both the low marsh and the high marsh. So we kind of know all the places where we need to do that. It's a bit more of a finite universe. So this document is slightly different than the forest framework. It's more of like a set of policy recommendations and an interesting way to approach the possibilities of restoration in different places. We also produce a native species planting guide. A new one is coming out this summer. This has actually been legislated. There's a local law about native species for New York City. You can look that up. I can't remember what the number is, but anyway, we produce every few years. The law requires us to produce a native species planting guide. So a new one will be coming out this summer. This is also available on our website. It has a bunch of like site conditions and plant traits and really aims to match up like habitat type with native species palettes. So for all of this, I want to say like we have these goals, but in a way they're kind of like values that play into our work. So we maintain and manage biodiversity. We maintain and expand urban forest canopy and its benefits. We preserve rare species and habitats. And all of these things involve invasive species management. But I haven't really talked much about invasive species management yet, right? But it's like one way that we accomplish these things or that we approach our work. It's one of the steps along the way. Photo time. This is a sequence of restoration in Alley Pond Park in Queens. If any of you are familiar, it's just south of Northern Boulevard and the LIRR in northeastern Queens. So this is a site, it runs just east of a tidal creek. It had been incredibly invaded. This is, you know, I don't know, a monoculture, a duoculture of, it looks like Phragmites and I believe porcelainberry in the landscape. So this is one of those, what do you think, like low health, high threat, right? It's like almost completely invaded. There's hardly any trees in the canopy. This is a place where we needed to start from scratch. This is a project that was part of the Million Trees Initiative. So we cleared it. Big difference, right? That's like something that comes up a lot in our work is like, does this look better than this? Like, not really, right? Maybe to like a well-informed eye or like an educated, you know, native plant expert, but this is like super green and lush, and this looks like a mud pit with some sticks in it. So it's like an interesting, you know, taking on large projects like this and how we interact with the public about it has a lot of nuance. We take on patches at a time, like 5 acres at a time, never that much bigger, because we know that, as Matt mentioned, even in a landscape like this, there are ecological benefits provided here. The Phragmites provides nesting for red-winged blackbirds. I had heard of a fox in this area before we started restoration. So we take our restoration projects on in patches with the idea that the other areas of the park are still available for any wildlife that are using the space. So this is in 2018. This is after an initial planting. 2 years later, same year. This is after seeding. What you're seeing on the ground here is straw mulch. It's just like meant to hold the seed in place. I'll pause here and say that when we restore a large site like this, we put in all the pieces at once. We remove, but planting is like almost the more important thing that we do. We plant trees of different sizes. I'll talk about that in a little bit. We plant shrubs. We plant early and late successional trees, I should say, the ones that grow really quickly and create shade, and the ones that hang out like oaks and take a longer time to grow. And then we seed native herbs and wildflowers and grasses, all at the same time. This is 2 years later. You can see the trees are getting a bit taller. This looks pretty good, right? Not bad. Very green. Here's 2022. Really, the trees are really growing. You can see tulip trees here in the foreground. New York City has a lot of oak tulip forests. It's one of our most dominant forest types, and we love to plant tulip trees. They grow quickly. They're beautiful. And then this is in the fall. And you can really see by this point the herbaceous layer. I mean, it's hard to tell in this photo, but you're seeing mostly native grasses here. Nice sycamore in the foreground, I think that is. Anyway, so that's like a big project. I'm going to talk about a little bit more of the nuanced work we do that is almost exclusively in the realm of maintenance. Like I said, we plant everything. We plant a lot. Nature abhors a vacuum. You have to plant, but you have to maintain it. And how we do that is what I'm going to talk about for the next few slides. So we do mowing. This is Ryan, one of our crew members. He's kind of in the process of mowing here. These are like cultural controls, you know. There might be natives in the ground cover layer that he's mowing, but the goal here is to make sure the trees aren't getting smothered. So you can kind of see the trees like here. And anyway, here, we just mow everything to the ground. We might need to do this like once a year, maybe twice, depending on what's coming back. But we always just want to make sure the trees have a leg up. That's a goal after we plant. And this, I think what you're looking at here is some larger material that we plant. That's one approach that we've transitioned to over the years, planting larger containerized material to create shade more quickly. We plant everywhere from 1-gallon shrubs to 2-gallon trees, but now we're planting larger trees too, just to create more structural diversity right off the bat and create some trees that are a bit ahead of the rest. Seeding, I've mentioned. This is seeding at a site in Marine Park in Brooklyn. This is right on the waterfront. It was previously invaded by, I think mostly Ailanthus, tree of heaven. It was all cleared out, and seeding here was our first step. This is a different site, but you can just see looks like it was seeded before planting. You can see how open it is here. We'll often do that. We seed with contractors when we can afford it because they can do it at a really large scale, and then we come back in and plant the native trees and shrubs. But like I said before about nature abhorring a vacuum, like this is a decent placeholder for a year or like one growing season before we plant, say, in the fall. Planting techniques. This has changed a lot over the years. I think a goal here for me was to talk about how during Million Trees, we planted incredibly densely because, like I said, the goal was to plant 1 million trees, so we were really squeezing them in there. And we do that both to get the numbers that we needed to satisfy the mayor's initiative or whatever, but then also to create that shade really quickly because, as Matt touched on, our invasive species are primarily sun-loving, and if you can create shade more quickly, that is one cultural strategy to keep them at bay. So plant very densely. This is like, I don't know, it could be the same site I showed you earlier, lots of trees all together. This is what a site like that looks like a decade later. So this is, to get into forestry a little bit, should be in what's called the stem exclusion phase, where trees grow up all at the same time together. We try to mimic succession in like putting a lot of rapidly colonizing trees in the site at once, with the idea that over time, they work it out amongst themselves. Some live, some die, some get shaded out. In this case, we've started to observe that didn't always happen on its own. And now, actually, at this site, these are folks on my team looking at thinning. We're going to be thinning this site. Actually, we did thin this site, this in Van Cortlandt Park. We selectively thinned for early successional species that were overly dominant in the stand. And we will this fall be replanting more shrubs that maybe didn't make it during the initial afforestation and adding more oak trees. So, and we're monitoring this this over time to see how it does. So it's funny, like sometimes the strategies you use will create more work for you in the future. Like that is totally fine, very normal and to be expected. And luckily we have the resources to creatively manage this. We have maybe like a dozen or so sites like this throughout the city that are just so dense that we might want to help it along from a successional perspective. So depending on how this does, we might start doing a bit more of that around the city. And then here, I think this is meant to illustrate what I mentioned already, which is planting larger trees in restoration sites, not only small ones. Here's some quite large oaks here that we planted. We also have to do protection in New York City. So we protect mostly from deer, sometimes from people. I guess if you guys didn't know, we have deer in New York City. They're in the Bronx, kind of obviously. You guys have them in Westchester. They can move throughout into the Bronx, but our real problems for deer are on Staten Island. I think the thought was that they swam over from New Jersey, no joke, through that narrow part between Conference House Park at it's where the South Pole of New York State is. Do you guys know that site? It's really cool. They have a South Pole. Anyway, it's the southernmost tip of New York State, but you can, like, maybe I could swim over to Perth Amboy, like right across the way. So, you know, when deer find themselves in Perth Amboy and then they swim to Staten Island, they're like, oh yes, like this is it. And because it's like it's a suburban landscape with lots of large parks and lots of people that don't know from deer. They're just like, oh, what's this? Like, interesting. They're so cute, you know? So deer are a huge problem on Staten Island. We have been managing their populations through male vasectomies. I won't get into that here, but if anybody wants to talk to me about it later, we can chat. So anyway, we put up fence around our new plantings because, you know, a bunch of 2-gallon trees in a big open area for deer is like a salad bar. It's like they're literally at like mouth height, and the deer just like walk up, bite off the apical meristem, and you know, the tree's maybe gone, like depending on the species. So we put up fence. We have a nice sign on the fence. If you guys can't read that, it says fencing has been constructed along this trail to protect our forest from overgrazing by deer. So, you know, seeing deer in New York City is a shock to New Yorkers. Seeing fence in the forest is a shock to people. Seeing the forest at all is a shock to people. So we aim to communicate, like using friendly and kind language and explain what we're doing, but not in an overly technical way. We'd also do like individual tree protection for, like, even once trees get taller, they're in danger of being rubbed during the rutting season in the fall. So we do individual tree protection as well as large-scale fencing. And we also have fenced rare plant populations. This is Turk's cap lily. It's a rare species on Staten Island. After 5 years of fencing, it started flowering again. No flowers before that for decades, who knows how long. And now after protection, we're getting these flowers. So trying to bring these special species back into our landscape. And then new techniques I'll mention. This is like, I just ran into someone yesterday that was heading out into the field to do this. This is porcelain berry. You guys, everybody know porcelain berry here? It's one of the bad ones, in my opinion. And it, you know, you can cut it all you want. It is like, has this incredible underground reserve of sugar that keep the plant going for years. So you can cut it, you can cut it. You could even put herbicide on the little cuts you made. You're like, oh, this is great. And then 2 years later, it's like back in full force. So the team started thinking about ways to get at like that underground root mass, and this was done using an air spade that's usually used for construction around mature trees, so you don't damage the roots. You can expose them and protect them during construction. Here we're using the air spade to expose the nodes of porcelain berry, cut them and treat them with herbicide at the stumps right there. So you're just able to get to kind of the root of the plant, and in a way that we just hadn't done before working above surface. So this is a new thing we're trying. So that a lot of that I talked about was like professionalized restoration and invasive plant management, but in New York City we do a lot with stewards. One of the 6 teams I oversee that Millie mentioned in my intro is our stewardship team. We have a team of 25 folks that their whole job is to bring the technical management work to the masses in a way. And we manage all these resources, including over 600,000 street trees, which I didn't really talk about much today, but that's another important part of nature in New York City. And the stewardship program brings people in to care for nature. Some people that come to an event, maybe with their school or with their corporate work or whatever, they're like, what? I had no idea this forest was here. Like, I've lived here my whole life and I've never seen this. So that like exposure to nature, we feel is like really critical for the current situation as well as future generations. Like the neglect that New York City has seen in its parks over the decades, we're trying to like chip away at that, you know. And I'll say, like, we don't rely on stewards to like complete our work. It is like an added value. So it's really important to us. Our stewardship programming has 4 different like programs within it. We have 4 different stewardship programs. One is called Green Neighborhoods. It's a place-based stewardship where we go into certain neighborhoods in New York City and have weekly events and meet people where they live, where they are, and get them kind of started. It's like they might be like, oh, I've never seen you guys out here before. But we'll run a whole series of programming just in that one neighborhood over the course of 1 or 2 years. And in that way, we build up interest and we build a new set of community stewards in that neighborhood. We have this funky acronym SNAP, but this is really like where staff, the professional staff that are working in the field, feed into the stewardship workflow by identifying projects that they think would be good for steward engagement. So they directly feed in by suggesting projects for stewards as like one step in their workflow. We have what we call big ticket events. Those are like big planting events. Like I mentioned when we did that 20,000 trees and shrubs in one day, definitely a big ticket event. Like we do big plantings every spring and fall in our natural areas, and those like often the events will have over 100 volunteers and maybe like a dozen staff, and we work directly with them and plant thousands of trees and shrubs. And those are like, you know, like I said, big, a lot of visibility. We will get press. Like last year at Earth Day, the mayor came. I taught him how to plant a tree, like, you know, that kind of thing, like a big show. And then we have super stewards, which is just a cute name for advanced volunteers. I know we have at least one super steward in the room today, maybe a couple more. But anyway, this is where folks, after joining events and getting involved, we give them individualized training and then permitting to independently care for nature on their own in parks. So they get like a hat, you know, a little card, like nobody yells at them. They're like official, and we train them and engage them over time. And here's an example of what stewards do. I mean, a lot of people do this for the enjoyment of it. It's like either retirees that want to fill their day with something productive, or just folks that love nature and want to get out there. So this is like a series of photos that a steward sent us of like, he labeled these too. It's like the before, he knew about the tree planting. Here's Japanese knotweed in the foreground. Here you can see how happy he is for clearing the tree. And then here he is with the tree. So yeah, it's like we make it very tangible, like focus on the trees that are planted, focus on this group of native shrubs, like really focus on something, and then make it simple, like remove all but this, or remove only this, you know? And it's just so, I mean, you can see how happy he is. It's just so heartwarming, right? This is a larger scale stewardship event where we're maintaining a planting site. This is in Goodhue Park on Staten Island. You can see the trees have deer guards around them, but it's kind of a long shot, but it is quite invaded. So working with stewards, we brought everything down. And this, when done strategically within the growing season, can buy you like a whole other year of growth on those trees, getting you that much closer to establishing canopy and creating the shade that'll outcompete the invasives over the long term. So this was done by stewards. Preserving desirable vegetation, like I just said, this is just a focus. Here you can see the folks working in the foreground. The focus was to free up this native tree, and you can see what they did in the end. They freed up the native tree. So super stewards, we have over 1,000 citywide. I will say most of them are care captains. That means they care for street trees on their block. You know, planting flowers, like mulching the beds, really important stuff. Those street trees, it's a hard life out there. And so the care captains are really important. But then we have over 300 working in natural areas. You can see how many hours folks put in 2023. And I'll just mention we have 3 different flavors of natural area advanced volunteers. Ones that work in forests and learn about forest care. We have trail maintainers that do trail maintenance. I really wanted to call it trailblazers, but I didn't win that one. So trail maintainers, and then shorekeepers, which is people that live near the shore and do coastal cleanups and maybe cut back phragmites here and there. We have a really like high level volunteerism thing that just rolled out last year, where there's a campaign to engage a record number of volunteers and encourage stewardship across New York City. This is, as you can see, following the Surgeon General's report on loneliness post-COVID, and like nature exposure and stewardship with colleagues and friends is known to be an antidote to this type of loneliness. So right now, over 200,000 New Yorkers volunteer with parks annually, but we have aimed to make that information transparent. There's a whole dashboard you can go to online and see the scale and the locations and the types of ways we're engaging New Yorkers. And then through that quantification and transparency, we aim to expand the reach, get more people out. So this is across all areas of the Parks Department, not just nature that I do. So things like ranger programming for kids, painting benches, all of this is included here, but the like high level support is there, and it's something we're already plugging into, so it's really exciting. So given this high level attention, how happy people are in the field, like we find that at parks, our communication choices are very important. We want to talk to people in a way that gets them on board, that makes them interested and motivated, not alienate them. So we've done a lot of thinking about this over the years, and I'm using zebra mussels as an example because this was the imagery I could find. But so how about this? Zebra mussels, not native, not welcome. I mean, right? I mean, it kind of reminds you of that. It really, like, it's evocative of, like, this isn't from here, I want it gone. We aim to not talk like that at New York City parks. Stop the zebra mussel invasion, like more fighting. You know, it's just like, this is, I mean, look at me, you guys. I'm like, this isn't me. This isn't what, when we work with people, this isn't how we talk. Like, we don't talk about eradication. We don't talk about invasion. We don't talk about, we try not to use militaristic language because we find that it alienates a whole group of people that we want to get on board. So, like I said before, we have gentle language. We use positive language, beautiful pictures, highlighting native species. This is our focus in New York City. Simple but clear. Why does this matter? What are we doing? All of our restoration sites just say that. So simple, right? We tell people about pollinators. We explain what Forever Wild is. We produce these public-facing documents for people to absorb and lean on. And we find that that has been really helpful in, getting people on board, motivating them. This isn't a war. it doesn't have to be an uphill battle. I mean, it is, but you know, for volunteers, like, we don't want them to think that what they're doing is like never going to make a difference, because freeing that one tree for that one growing season really does make a difference, and that's what we want to focus on. It's like, keep the natives alive. Look how the Turk's cap lily flowered when we put fence around it. Like, focus on the positive, because really invasive species management is only one step along the way in caring for our urban and suburban landscapes. Here's another example of a flyer that we hang up in neighborhoods to get people to come out and work with us. We even have started saying, try not to say invasive that much. This is hard because they're called invasive plants. That is the terminology that is, you know, scientifically applied and very relevant. But even that, like, it just can be triggering for some people. So we say introduced, we say problem. I really like Matt's focus on the, like, hitchhiker language. We use that. Like, the plants aren't the bad guys. They're not culpable. People are. We've moved them around unintentionally. And they're introduced, and they've created an imbalance. And that's what we're working on. We also now provide site histories for our stewardship events. This is another way in which our technical staff connect with our stewardship team. We share information about park development over time. New York City, same as here, super rich historic information. We share about previous land use, what was here before, when it became a park, why did it become a park. We share information about the community around it among our stewardship team, and then either share that with stewards if we're bringing them in from elsewhere, because sometimes we do get like a big group of people from JP Morgan Chase, and we're bringing them into, you know, what might be an underserved community that they've never entered before, and we aim to inform them about where they are, what the cultural considerations might be for this park and this community. And then we give a history of our restoration and management. What have we done in the past? What are we considering looking forward? All this context is super important, and we find that people just eat it up. Like, it's really helps, again, getting people on board, feel like they understand the goal, like they're invested. I think this is my last few slides, but I've presented these before, and I just want to say, like, you know, see the question, is it worth it? Like, will you ever be successful? Like, there's a lot of talk about this. The damages, the cost of damages from invasive species is really, really high, as Matt said, but the cost of managing is also really, really high. And, you know, in New York City, where do you think we're managing? We're managing here. Like, that's where we're managing. It's New York City. It's super invaded. We're just trying to like tip the scales. We're trying to tip the balance. And so, anyway, does it pay off? We think it does, and we've done some research around it. These are parkies and colleagues that have done some long-term research. You know, forests grow on a really long-term scale, so it's important to consider that. Not any, like, I like the, you know, I look forward to seeing that research about 8 years of maintenance. That might be good for us. But, you know, over time, forests evolve, like, whether you're there or not. And so you can go in and do these big efforts, but maintenance is really important. That's what this study says. It says, so this is a control forest where nothing was done. This is species diversity, tree species diversity here. Control, nothing was done. Clearing, oh geez, I'm not gonna get this right. Oh yeah, clearing only. So if we just went in and cleared all the vines and didn't plant anything, what happens? So you do get some, it looks like you get a positive impact from that, right? Clearing and then planting, obviously more natives are establishing because you put them there. But then really important, the maintenance over time. And you especially see that down here where you're looking at, this is invasive shrubs and vines on the y-axis, and you just see the lowest outcome, less, you still have the invasive vines, don't get me wrong, they're still there, but with maintenance, way less. So again, how much maintenance is optimal? How long do you have to do this? We're really interested in knowing these results. Again, a long-term study, similar thing where with invasive species removal and native tree planting, we did see that over time, yes, there was lower invasive species abundance. There was a more complex forest structure. You do see greater native tree recruitment. You do see more basal area. So anyway, this is, again, just like a couple of sites. So taking a larger approach is really important, but we have seen positive results from our work in the scientific literature. So always happy to work with folks on this sort of thing. There's not enough out there, I think, about urban restoration. And then to me, like, this is a big story of success, right? Like, just that people are out there, that they're engaged, that they're having fun, that they learned there was a forest in Manhattan, that they saw the oldest tree. Like, that is so important to us. And I just want to, like, bring that home, that the experience is enjoyable if you frame it appropriately, and the outcomes can be beneficial both socially and ecologically. I'll leave it there. Thanks. No idea what time it is, so. Oh, good.
Thank you so much. We're going to do questions for Christy at the end as part of our Q&A, and we've also been given permission that we can stay here for a few extra minutes, so we'll be here a little bit past 12:30 if people want to stay longer for a Q&A. I found that to be really inspiring, and even though New York City is so much bigger than Westchester County and so much bigger than all of the municipalities, I thought that there was a lot of good information in there that we can apply to our own area. And I also find really inspiring our next speakers, which are going to be the Blind Brook High School students. And their teacher, Julie Hensley, will introduce her students who will discuss the ways in which over the last several years they are working to restore Harkness Park, which is on Village of Rybrook land, and it abuts their high school campus. So please join me in giving them and their teacher a warm welcome.
So my name is Julie Hensley. I'm a teacher at Blind Brook High School, and this is my crew. They're going to talk about the last 2 years, the work we've been doing in Harkness Park. And I have Lana Kim, Kara Curran, Emily Davis, Jinju Prince, and Taka Kimura. So I'll hand it over to them.
Hi everyone, we're really excited to be talking about this project today. It's actually really similar to the New York City Stewardship Program, and it's a project that we've been working on for around the last 3 years, and it's still ongoing. And just in case you're not aware, we're part of the Roots and Shoots Club, and the Roots and Shoots organization is a program of the Jane Goodall Institute, and they have a mission to empower youth to enact impactful changes in their communities. Luckily, we were able to find the perfect place to start this project, and just to give you a little bit of context, Blind Brook High School is located in Rybrook, New York, and we're just by the border of New York and Greenwich, Connecticut, and the school is just off of King Street. So if you take a look at this map right here, you can see how Harkness Park is located right next to the Blind Brook High School, and this forested section of the park is where we've been working on for the past few years. These two dotted red lines represent paths that students take almost every day to get to this parking lot. So if I show you this picture here of our club advisor, Miss Hensley, in red, you can see how mugwort has grown along the periphery of the park, and it's even grown above her head. This is really similar to how what the first speaker was talking about, how we have a lot of more invasive species along the periphery of our park, and even here you can see a path going through. And this is the same path I was mentioning in the previous slide, where students are walking on to get to the parking lot. So mugwort is surrounding both sides of the path. And seeing that this park was so close to the school building, and it was a great opportunity to remove invasive species, where we can then plant new native ones, and support pollinator pathways, we were achieving this goal of increasing pollinator populations in our local area. And what was so great about this specific portion of the park was that it's owned by the town of Rybrook. Originally, we thought this might be a little bit of an issue because we didn't know how that would work, but thankfully they've been super enthusiastic about this project and very supportive. Oh, sorry. So to begin this project, we enlisted the help of a celebrity and guest speaker here today. You might be able to catch him in this picture, Tara Iataka, who gave us, Iataka, and he gave us some advice on what invasive trees we should remove. Those were specifically the Norway maple and the tree of heaven. We've also had help from former student of Blindbrook and now mayor of Rybrook, who I'm sure many of you know, Jason Klein, and he gave us some advice on what native trees to plant in their place.
So with such little money that we have here at Blindbrook, we need to find different ways to manage these invasive species. So one way we decided was to cover our park in cardboard. This cardboard would be received from our cafeteria and shipments of food. So we collect them and use them to smother invasive species such as garlic mustard and mugwort. And then we'd cover this in dirt. And as you can see, we cover the entire park, and we would cut holes for native plants to grow through and also to plant new native plants. So many of these plants were from the Native Plant Center, and as you may know, a lot of people from the Native Plant Center may be here today, so we just wanted to give a shout out and say thank you. It's been incredible work to help our project. And we also received saplings from the school seedling program, and that was orchestrated by the Department of Environmental Conservation. So we also realized that we needed to find ways to make money to help support and buy these new native plants and also remove these invasive species. So one way we decided was to apply, and we received grants from the Roots and Shoots organizations in 2021 and 2022. And also very generously, our PTA, the Blindbrook PTA, gave us new tools that we've continuously been using to remove these invasive species. And we've also held fundraisers at our school, like selling chocolate truffles. And these truffles not only help us raise money for our club, but also spread our mission, like the work we've been doing, helping with remove these invasive species like garlic mustard and mugwort. So the town has been really supportive throughout this entire project. Not only did they give us the go-ahead to go use this space, but they also gave us this water cistern that we use to help maintain and water because we were worried about how we were going to help our fragile plants. And they also help remove the piles and piles of invasive species that we removed because we didn't want to leave them on our school property, but we also didn't know just to leave them in the forest because they would germinate and we'd be back to square one in our project. So it's been really helpful with helping them remove off our property. Although this isn't an accurate picture on the left, this is a pile of invasive species we removed, and we removed far more in a day, but we didn't think to take a better picture at the time.
And just to give you a couple of numbers about how many people have worked in Harkness, this club started with about 10 students, and now with the growing club and the new environmental science class at Blindbrook High School, we have over 50 students working on this park. And we also introduced our project to the entire 6th grade last year, and if you include them, over 100 students. Also, we work over the summer, so our club volunteers their time during the summer to continue to water these plants and remove the invasive species so that when we come back in the fall, it's not just like a ton of work all at once. The environmental science also, their class has been putting in a ton of their work hours into this park, and they've put in over 30 hours, which has really helped us this year. The first invasive species that we're going to talk about is burning bush, and I'm sure you know burning bush is difficult to remove, so our club members have been sawing down burning bush, but it's sprouting. So another plant that we've removed is English privet, which the roots are much easier to remove. So in total, we've taken out about 60 English privet, but due to the roots of burning bush, only about 4 with the roots we've taken out, and 12 to 15 we've just sawed. Another one is Tree of Heaven, and Tree of Heaven's thick and wide root system makes it very labor intensive to remove. So we've taken out about 8 mature trees, and we're hoping that we got this during the eradication period because we don't see any more right now, but we're still like keeping an eye out for new ones sprouting up. Tree of Heaven also we've really worked on removing because it's an important host plant for spotted lanternfly. So by removing these trees, we hope to reduce the number of spotted lanternfly in the area.
So the last invasive species we're going to be talking about is Norway maple. Unfortunately, a lot of the Norway maple at Harkness Park is mature, and we simply don't have the means or equipment to remove these ourselves. So thankfully, the town has stepped in, and they've removed around 12 Norway maple, and actually just yesterday, they removed around 8 more. So removing these trees has been really important in preserving and supporting the native plants in the understory of the park. As I'm sure many of you know, Norway maple tends to grow really quickly and it becomes really large. So we want to make sure that the native plants in the understory are receiving as much nutrients and sunlight as they possibly can. If you look on the picture on the right, we have been clearing an area in the forest, and this area used to be filled with around 3 to 4 feet of leaves, and that's just accumulated over the years from leaf blowing. But we've intentionally cleared these leaves to make room for around 100 new saplings that we plan to plant in the next few months. And this has also been part of the reason why we've had such a large emphasis on removing these Norway maples, because we again want to give them as much sunlight and nutrients as possible. We've also used the logs of the Norway maple as a periphery around the park, as you can see here. And that's been really helpful in getting other people to understand, people just walking through the park, to understand and recognize this portion of the park is cultivated and a place that we've been working on.
So because of our work at Harkness Park, we've been able to become a certified Arbor Day tree campus. Along with this, we've held 3 Arbor Day celebrations at our school with the village of Rybrook. And these past 3 years, each year at the celebration, we've planted a new native tree. So in total, we've planted a shagbark hickory, a black tupelo, and a swamp white oak. As part of a mandate of being a tree campus, we created an educational program for the younger students at the middle school, at Blindbrook Middle School. Part of this included educating them about invasive trees as well as native trees. So we created fun programs like scavenger hunts, as well as slogans such as "No Way Norway" to help them remember the importance of removing these invasive plants as well as identifying them. Despite our success, we still have some current issues that we're looking to address. The first being deer browsing. We've heard a lot about the issues of deer in the previous presentation. We've lost a lot of shrubs and saplings that we've planted due to deer browsing because of the population in our area. So we have attempted to use wire cages to surround plants that we planted. So in this picture, it's a witch hazel plant that we used a wire cage, and it has been fairly successful, but as we prepare to plant about 100 new saplings, as we mentioned, we're looking into other ways such as tree tubes, but again, we're still looking for the most cost-effective ways to do so. We've also had a new issue of snake root, and it's really dominated a significant portion of the understory in Harkness Park. Since it's native, we are not sure if we should just let it run its course or start some sort of removal process with it. So we're looking for feedback on this, since we're a little bit nervous about how it may be affecting the biodiversity of our park. Again, we're also looking to expand our community outreach and awareness, specifically within our high school community. Previously, we've created posters like these two to educate our high school community about what we're doing in the club, as well as just what the club is generally. So we have been making some plans to potentially put signs and posters around the periphery of the park, as many students do walk past, yet still they don't know the importance of the park or even what it is. But we're also looking into other options, such as QR codes, and we're really trying to find what would be the most effective and engaging for specifically high school students. And of course, I'm sure all of you know, spotted lanternfly has become an issue. We've seen the first sightings of spotted lanternflies this past summer, so we're really looking into new ways. We have removed some trees of heaven, which have been helpful in reducing their populations, but still, of course, we want to find more effective ways to reduce their populations.
So the problem we're trying to address is the ever-growing population of lanternflies in Westchester County. And current commercial solutions and pre-made kits are really expensive. I mean, some of them are upwards of $50, and that's really cost prohibitive for a lot of people. DIY solutions are a lot cheaper, but at the same time, they're extremely labor and resource intensive, so it's hard to manufacture on a larger scale. Our design takes inspiration from Rachel Burgee, a high school student who shared her idea online, and it's basically to take advantage of the lanternfly's natural instinct to climb up trees. And as they climb up the tree, they'll be funneled into a bag where they're unable to harm the tree and will eventually die. So our design principles are firstly to be sustainable, and we don't want to harm natural wildlife. Current solutions out there right now, like sticky tape, are great for getting lanternflies caught, but they also catch natural insects and even some small birds, so you really don't want that. Secondly, we want to be affordable. The current cost for the materials is around $10 to $12, which is a lot cheaper than $50. And thirdly, we want to make sure that it is easy setup and maintenance. The idea is to have the trap be set up one time when you put it up, and then when you take it down. There's no need to reset bait or adjust the bags at all. And lastly, we want to make sure that these traps are adjustable to most tree sizes. So depending on the size of your tree, you just use a different amount of wideners here. And lastly, our end goal for this project is to briefly sell them as a way to fundraise for the club, and then eventually open source the design so anyone else can do these. I have a couple prototypes in my bag, so if anyone wants to learn more or talk about it, I can show you guys there.
So from our work in Harkness, we've really gotten to know the native species in our area and the birds and the pollinators to the spring ephemerals. And two species that we were really surprised to see in our park were pyrola and Dutchman's breeches. And without our work, we wouldn't have known they would have existed in this location that is extremely close to our school. We've also noticed a dramatic increase in the pollinator populations within our park, which has just been really rewarding and amazing to see, as it was one of our original goals in starting this restoration project. So you can see we like to take pictures of the different pollinators we see every time we see a new one. And just looking even at the visual appearance of the park from when we started around 2021 to 2023, you can see the dramatic difference in these two photos with the number of native species we were able to reintroduce, as well as we were able to remove a lot of invasive species. And even comparing us as underclassmen to now, we've of course grown so much in just our knowledge and being able to identify different invasive and native species. We started pretty nervous, worried about getting our hands dirty, and we had to always ask our advisor to identify these invasive and native species for us. And now we're not only able to do that for ourselves, but also educate other students who are joining and are interested in our club about the importance of removing these invasive species. And lastly, we'd just like to acknowledge a couple of the many groups that have been really helpful with this project. It wouldn't have been possible without them, specifically the Rybrook Village Administration, which we mentioned gave us the go-ahead, as well as the water cistern, and removed a lot of these invasive species. They've been really supportive of all our endeavors within this project, as well as the Blindbrook PTA, who has been very generous with their donations, and our lovely advisor, Ms. Hensley. Although she may not want to shout out, this project wouldn't have been possible, or club wouldn't have been possible without her. So thank you.
Thank you all so much. That was really very inspirational. I feel like if you guys can do it, then all of us can do it. Thank you. We're going to take a very quick 5-minute break, and then when we come back, we'll have our last speaker, and then we'll have the roundtable presentation. Parkland for the past 20 years and has seen many changes to our open spaces in that time, including the arrival of a number of new invasive species. He served 2 terms on the Lower Hudson Prism Steering Committee is an ISA certified arborist, past president of the Connecticut Westchester Mycological Association, and member of the Cold Spring Tree Advisory Board. Please join me in giving Taro a warm welcome. What's your last name?
No, perfect. All right. Hello, everybody. To start, a word for all my colleagues in the nonprofits and municipalities that might be looking to hire for the summer. I get first dibs on this crew. That was really amazing to see the work you've done. I was there in 2021 when it was an overgrown lot, and to see the results you're coming up with is truly amazing. And thank you to my previous speakers, Christy and Matt. Christy, amazing, inspiring work. We have a lot to work towards in Westchester, and so I'm looking forward to collaborating more with you. And Matt, that was the first time I heard you speak publicly. Fantastic. Took a lot of notes. Good stuff there. So my presentation is going to be from the perspective of both a representative of Westchester County who helps to manage 18,000 acres of parkland. But in talking with Millie, I also understand that there's a lot of municipalities and nonprofits who might be working with smaller parcels of land. And there's also homeowners like myself who may be dealing with the same issues. So the focus today and the point that I want to make is the strategies that we're using in Westchester County on the landscape level are the same ones that can be applied for a homeowner. So I'm going to do case studies. I'm going to talk strategy. Big part of it is allocation of resources and time. Everybody here is busy. Everybody probably on their weekends has better things to do than to spend hours pulling garlic mustard. So how to approach your own properties in a way where you can achieve success and not just fall into despair and give up completely. So that is my talk. So a little background. So Matt and Christy covered a lot of the stuff that we're talking about as far as sources for arrival, the invasion curve. I'll repeat just a few things, starting with some of the threats that we're seeing. So that picture in the middle is Marshlands Conservancy. And what you're seeing is a deer with absolutely no fear of humans. And he is standing in a field of Japanese stilt grass, and that stilt grass is growing under a dying beech stand that has been affected by beech leaf disease. So in a nutshell, this is what we're facing. Threats from all sides, and so how do we approach problems like this? There is our friend. Okay, so just a little background. Matt showed the invasion potential of spread. I can't remember the exact term, Matt, but on a larger scale, this is kind of the global climate zones that we are looking at. So for the Mid-Atlantic and New England, we're looking at this green and this blue. And if we follow this around the world, we're seeing the English Isles, British Isles, we're seeing Central Europe. Keep following it around, we're hitting China and we're hitting Japan. So a big part of the history of the invasion of our region follows both climate and trade. So with the arrival of the Europeans in the 1500s, we probably would have had an influx of plants like plantain. That was known as the white man's footprint at one point. So if we were to time travel back a couple hundred years, I think a lot of the plants that we see naturalized now, dandelions, chicories, plantains, would have been a lot more like some of the more recent invaders that we're seeing now from Asia. So the hope with a lot of the invasives that we're seeing is that eventually they'll naturalize and hit a state where they're not becoming so much of a threat to our natives. Now, more recently, a lot more of our trade is coming from Asia, and so a lot of our emerging invaders tend to be coming from China and Japan. So that kind of follows the trend there. And this is a Google image, satellite image of Westchester County. So here's the Connecticut border, and we have the New York border down here. And as you see, Westchester is this mix of rural and exurban up in the north, and urban down south. So we're getting hit from both sides. Now, you'd think that from the north, we would have less disturbed land, and that is true in large part. However, we have a lot of white-tailed deer, and in terms of restoration, beaver are another issue. We also have the responsibility as land stewards in Westchester County of trying to maintain the integrity of some of those landscapes. So I work at Wardpound Ridge Reservation, and over the past 20 years, I've seen multiple new invasions. So my goal is to try to keep that from spreading, to try to keep some of those healthy plant populations and ecological communities as healthy as possible. Down south, what we're dealing with is going to be a lot of new invaders spreading out of the urban areas. So one of the plants we're going to talk about a little bit later is incised fumewort, Corydalus incisa, and that was one, for example, that spread out of the New York City metro area. So a lot of our invaders are the results of accidental introductions or intentional introductions that have gone awry. So example being the emerald ash borer. So emerald ash borer has devastated Westchester County within the past 6-7 years. The story behind the invasion of this one is that it was spread from Asia, we think, on contaminated shipping pallets. At least that's the story that I've heard. So with the increase in global trade, we are increasing our exposure to spread of invasives. Spotted lanternfly is another one where we think that the egg masses arrived on pallets of stone that were used in building and ornamental reasons. So unintentional introductions. Asian jumping worm is another. And this is going to be a little video just to show you why they get their names. Amazing. So if anybody here in Westchester has not experienced these, please do let me know. We are actually looking for locations that do not have jumping worms to see the effect of their introduction. So anecdotally, I've been mushrooming in Westchester County for the last 20 years. And, sorry, still on worms. And where we're finding jumping worms, we do not find the types of mushrooms that we've been looking for in the past. So with disturbance to the soil, there's some question as to whether they are creating inhospitable conditions for mycorrhizal fungi. So the fungi that partner with trees and plants, 80% of them, may be impacted by these worms. And this is something I'd love to pair with some researchers to prove scientifically, but there is going to be an impact. The other thing that these worms do is, as you can see, you might have seen that the soil that the castings that they leave behind that look like cooked ground beef, those castings are highly susceptible to erosion. So after a rainfall, we will find up to 2 inches of worm castings on the uphill side of a fallen log. Now, we're all in watersheds, so those worm castings are going to be entering our water bodies, possibly triggering eutrophication, algae blooms, eruptions of invasive aquatic plants. So we are facing problems from all over. These worms, by the way, most likely introduced by fishermen, but now it is worth checking plants that you're putting into your gardens, checking the soil for those castings. I have actually found worm castings and potentially the worms themselves in potted up material. And the goal is not to alarm anybody, but it's just one of those precautions you should take. It's not uncommon to find little cardamom plants, little bitter cresses in potted nursery material as well. Multiflora rose is another one. This was an intentional introduction that had some unintended consequences. So both multiflora rose and kudzu were installed as erosion control plants that have run amok. So multiflora rose, that picture by my colleague Michael Gambino, by the way. And one thing in Westchester that we have are a lot of old mansions. So from the 1910s, the Gilded Age, and with these beautiful properties like this is Mearstead in Mount Kisco, were a lot of ornamental plantings that we are now at the end of the lag effect. The ornamental plantings that were done in the 1900s at these estates we're starting to see become very problematic. So examples of that, Rye Nature Center, where they have the old mansion from the 1910s. They have jet bead galore. At Mearstead, we're seeing Christmasberry popping up. At Lenoir, the Whiteman Mansion, and at the Jay Heritage Center, we're seeing something called five-finger aralia. So these old mansions are areas to keep an eye on because they do cause some spread. And disturbance. So Christy mentioned that the plants that are most able to take advantage of disturbance, including gaps in the canopy, tend to be invasive species, alien species, non-native species that are adapted to high sun, high disturbance areas. So this image right here of a pretty much denuded canopy is something we're seeing more and more of in Westchester County. So this is Marshlands Conservancy in Rye. This photo is taken from the end of May last year. So this is after the tree has leafed out. It has then dropped its foliage. This is the result of something called beech leaf disease, which I'll talk about more in a little bit. But a beech stand like this should be our densest shaded hardwood type of forest around. And what we're seeing is this massive gap in the canopy starting to arise. Now, in addition to beech leaf disease, we've had emerald ash borer, which is causing gaps in the canopy, which allow sunlight to hit the forest floor, which allow stiltgrass, barberry, bittersweet, all these invasive species to take over. In combination with deer pressure, that's going to select against native regeneration, we're seeing our formerly somewhat pristine areas, or at least lesser disturbed areas, being colonized by these invasive species. Flooding has been another big issue. So extended periods of flooding will kill certain tree species. We've seen this at Pound Ridge, where you've had beaver dams created where there were none in the past. Those flood zones then have dead trees on all sides, which are again prone to invasion. We've had disease as well, so beech leaf disease, beech bark disease, tree pathogens, so many disturbances to our canopy. In addition, development. Westchester is a highly developed area with a history of land use that goes back centuries. So when you have an area like Rye, we've had at the Rye Nature Center a 5-acre deer exclosure put up. Now, what we saw there was increase in population of native species, however, no recruitment. So extensive human use over centuries has pretty much depleted the seed bank in some areas where you're not getting native regeneration. Therefore, you're going to have to supplement that regeneration with assisted plantings. Fires are something we're starting to get more concerned with as well. So last year in Westchester County, we had 3 wildfires in May that I know of. So at Blue Mountain, there's several acres that caught fire during one of these spring droughts. There was a smaller fire in North Salem, across the street from Mountain Lakes Park, and a third one by Sprout Brook up in Cortland. Now, combine drought conditions with the increase in number of standing dead trees, again caused by beech leaf disease, and the ash borer, and you're having conditions that are going to be more conducive to wildfires. So that is going to be something to keep an eye on as well. A visit to one of those burn sites about 4 weeks after the burn, so it would be in June 2023, and what we saw were hundreds and hundreds of ailanthus, tree of heaven seedlings. So they seem primed to take advantage of these disturbances. Hopefully this is not too depressing yet. Okay, there's going to be some happy slides, some feel-good stuff coming up later. One other thing to point out is the rapidity, that the escalation in change over time. So there's this amazing paper, it's called 4 Centuries of Change in Northeastern United States Forests. I think the slides will be available, so you'll be able to grab the authors off of that. But basically, they were able to look at woodlots from the 1600s. So basically, mark trees that were mark the corners of woodlots from New England into Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Compare those with municipal data from the 2000s and able to see the changes that have occurred over time. So this is the spread of the European colonists. So before 1660 in red, and you can see by 100 years later, they've spread to the areas in green. So the forests prior to European arrival would have had extensive hemlock and beech forests. We've all heard stories of the white pine that were used for the British fleet ship masts. So mature old growth forests. And with the arrival of Europeans and the spread, we had widespread clear cutting. Now, despite that, if we look at this, comparing different tree genera with pre-colonial number of stems and modern number of stems, we get an idea of the change over time. Now, the thing that I want to point out from this, though, is that with very few exceptions, they're relatively stable. 400 years, not much change in tree species presence. The big exception, chestnut. Okay, but even here, when this study was done, hemlock had decreased by half, but it was still pretty widely spread. Ashes had actually increased. Beeches, heavy decrease from a late successional forest to early successional stages. What we've seen in the last 100 years, though, are changes to this as well. So Dutch elm disease, that number of elms is expected to be much lower than what's in this study. Hemlocks, because of the hemlock woolly adelgid, also should be much lower than that. Beeches are going to see a decrease as well. So we're seeing escalating speed in some major species that characterize our forests. This is going to be an image showing the distribution. So beech from pre-colonial to modern. Maple has been the big winner. Maples have spread abundantly. For those who are looking to do restoration work, maples may not need our help. We can expect them to increase on their own. So when we're doing restoration, we're doing this with an eye on diversity and therefore trying to choose species that might not be favored by the conditions being generated anyway. All right. So just a word about this photo here, again by my colleague Michael Gambino. So this is one of the species that we are watching closely, not just watching, picking actively in Westchester County. So this one is beautiful herbaceous plant. It's blooming, should be right about now. It's called Corydalus incisa. Purple cayman is another name for it. So this is one of our things that we are looking at. By we, I'm referring to Westchester County Department of Parks, Recreation, and Conservation. So we have 50 plus facilities throughout Westchester County. We have 18,000 acres, about 14,000 of that is natural areas. We have, oops, sorry about that. We have about 240 full-time staff, supplemented in the summer by about 750 seasonal and hourly staff. What that breaks down to is about 18 acres per person. Okay. Now, that does not count the lifeguards, that does not count the groundskeepers at golf course, that does not count our payroll and HR departments that are not actively helping with invasive species management. So that number grows rapidly, which is going to be a big formulator of the strategies that we use to maintain our parks. So we have beautiful scenic things like the Croton Gorge Dam. But like Christy showed, we also have some areas like this with the vines crawling up our utility poles, where we'll have Phragmites swamping our wetlands, where we'll have multiflora rose and mugwort spreading rapidly too. Now, unfortunately, this is from my park. I was gathering photos for this presentation, and I did not have to travel more than about 500 feet to do this. They're widespread. Even at our most natural areas, we are facing these issues. So when you have that little staff with that much acreage, we have to approach this smartly. Now, we can't outsmart ourselves. We can't be paralyzed by inaction or formulation. We have to act when it's necessary, but in a way that's going to give us our best chances of success. So, considerations when we're choosing which species to manage. So we do manage our parks for the public, and there's an expectation of what they should look like. So when we have a historic site like the Whiteman Manor in Lenoir Preserve, this is not a place where we want multiflora growing above the window line and bittersweet climbing up the downspouts of the rain gutters. So we do manage for aesthetics. That is one consideration. Another consideration is we are the stewards of quite a few rare and endangered species in our county. Those are going to be one of our highest priorities to protect. So in this case, we have hired through the Friends of the Trailside Museum in Ward Pound Ridge a team of botanists to survey the park looking for all our vascular plants, but in particular rare species. Now, when they're found, what we'll do is then we will try to keep the non-native opportunistic plant threat at bay. So this is a site, I'm not going to disclose the location, where we have an S1, a state endangered plant, that we have teamed up with the Lower Hudson Prism Invasive Strike Force, and I'll talk more about them in a bit. Last year, we spent time pulling out Taringo crabapple, cutting back Phragmites, multiflora rose, in an effort to keep this site free of those invaders that could potentially overgrow our rare plant. To make wise decisions, one of our biggest tools is the Lower Hudson Prism's tier rankings. So if you go to lhprism.org, it's an amazing resource. And what they've done is through a work group that I believe, Matt, you've been a part of it in the past? He said unfortunately, but no, we're very fortunate that he was. So basically what this is a team of partners. Anybody can join. So Village of Hastings, you can join LH Prism. Nonprofits, co-ops, associations, schools may even be able to join. But in addition to information exchange, they offer grants. They offer the services of trained professionals, invasive species removal. But one of the most valuable things they do is through the work group, they rank different species based on both ecological threat and socioeconomic threat. They rank them based on extent of spread, and they have categories that go from threat species, tier 1, that might be something that's on the doorstep. For many years, through, I guess, the late teens, spotted lanternfly was one of those threat species that had not yet arrived. So tier 1s we are constantly on the lookout for. Tier 2 is emerging species that are just starting to arrive. If you remember that the invasion curve, where the amount of time required to get rid of or control a species is going to be much lower resource-wise early in the arrival process. Tier 2 are those species. That is what we focus on for the most part in Westchester County. So that's purple Keeman, that beautiful corydalus plant that I had that picture of with the purple flowers, that is one of those tier 2 species. At least in the late teens, there were only 2 locations for that plant. Our thinking was, if we get on it fast, control it, we can keep it from spreading. Tier 3, established species, so something like Japanese Angelica, where you go for a drive down a parkway, you may see it in 2 or 3 different places, but it's not everywhere yet. Tier 4, widespread species, is going to be stuff like your Japanese barberry, your Asian Oriental bittersweet, stuff that is basically, no matter where you look, you're going to see it. And tier 5 are watch species, so things that we suspect may become invasive. Japanese maple, one of those species as well. So this is going to be almost our blueprint for what we tackle as the Parks and Rec Department for Westchester County. And that, again, is because it's a higher likelihood of success when we're tackling those tier 2 species. Now, even though we are sometimes outmatched, at least in count, by the non-native plants, there seem to be tens of thousands or millions for every staff person we have, we do have lots of allies in this. We could not maintain our parks to our level without their assistance. So in addition to Westchester County Parks, Planting Westchester, Millie is leading that team. Planting Westchester is a great resource for information exchange and knowledge. They organize workshops like this. The Westchester Parks Foundation, of which we have Megan here, working with from the Invasive Species Strike Force of Lower Hudson Prism. So Westchester Parks Foundation is kind of our volunteer coordination arm. Every year they recruit thousands of volunteers with tens of thousands of volunteer hours, much of that going to invasive species control. The Lower Hudson Prism, in addition to having that fantastic website, as I said, they do issue grants, and they have that invasive strike force. They have a great series of YouTube videos that I recommend as well. They help with identification. They train volunteers in recognizing tier 2 species. So that's something that anybody can sign up for. In addition, we have the Soil and Water Conservation District and the Department of Planning. So Soil and Water Conservation District for the last few years has been instrumental in not only funding invasive species management plans, but also in purchasing plant stock that we can use for restoration work. Yes, Nicole back there. And last not least, Hilltop Hanover Farms. So in the past few years, we've actually started our own native plant program to collect seed from our parks, from our native plants, to grow them in-house so that we can then use them for restoration projects. So that's a key piece that's starting to come into place for our work. In addition, no logos here, but we have organizations like the Bronx River Parkway Conservancy Alliance, Bob Del Tordo, Haven Colgate with the Hillside Woods and the Trees for Tribs plantings all along the sawmill. You've probably seen those as well. So there are people out there that are looking to help. It's just a matter of coordinating them and getting them together. All right. So more about our strategy. So limited resources, as I've described, limitless challenges, and more seem to be coming faster and faster. So early detection and rapid response, a strategy that Matt talked about earlier. I'll go into it a little bit more. So for those in the back, I'll read this out. This is from a paper by Reeser and Kirky. But basically, EDRR, Early Detection and Rapid Response, is a coordinated framework for the management of new invasive species introductions. DOI, Department of the Interior, regards EDRR as a coordinated set of actions to find and eradicate potential invasive species before they spread and cause harm. Both definitions emphasize a need for coordination among government agencies and a wide range of non-governmental stakeholders, and the focus on taking action at the introductory stage of the invasion process. This is what we try to do as much as possible. So in practice, what that means is we are focusing our attention on plants like this. This is Lamium galliobdolon, excuse my pronunciation, yellow archangel. This is a plant that I know of 2 locations in Westchester County Parks, one of them at Silver Lake Preserve in White Plains, the other at Kitchewan off 134. So in the case of Silver Lake Preserve, this is an ornamental plant, kind of used in gardens fairly often. One thing we see in our parks is they are frequent areas for dumping. So we'll have Christmas trees. Every February, every January, we find a whole bunch of new Christmas trees on the perimeters of our park or at our parking areas. We also find liners and containers for plants and trees. So landscapers will rake, they'll plant, and they'll dump everything left behind in our parking lots. So this particular plant is growing at one of those sites. On the edge of a parking lot, we suspect that maybe during a spring cleanup, the landscaper raked the stuff up, put it in a pile in the truck, dumped it in one of our parks, and then it has gone on to spread. So through early detection, basically by having boots on the ground, we were able to find this patch, about 1/4 of an acre of it. Still at a time, still not regionally or widely spread in Westchester County, that this became one of our top priorities. So last year, my colleague Leah Cass in the back treated this one. We hope that that nips it in the bud and that problem will not spread. So we're focusing our attention on that, much less of our attention on things like this. Japanese barberry. It's a beast. It's a real tough one to control. It's not the worst, but we have acres and acres and acres of this. So rather than dedicate the limited time that we have for our staff diving headlong into these prickers, we're going to try to work smarter. Now, I know that may not please people if you're a visitor to Muscoot and you like taking the trails and you see the Japanese barberry all over the place. We know. We need more volunteers. It is something we're aware of. It's just the extent of the problem. This is a Tier 4 established regional. It's not just Westchester County Parks that has a problem with this. This is widespread just about everywhere locally. Okay, so this is kind of meant for all of us, the homeowners, the municipalities, the nonprofits, and myself. So in approaching our, I'm not going to say battle because I like Christy's use of non-combative terms, but in our struggle, okay, in our challenge with our friends, the non-native plants, step one, what I consider essential is you have to know what you have in order to manage it properly. All right, so my favorite philosopher, Bertrand Russell, has this saying that the good life is one that is inspired by love and guided by knowledge. So now imagine you're a well-intentioned homeowner. Before you go out and say, you know, you think there's a plant that might not be native, it might be an invasive, let's eradicate the whole thing and we'll go to Home Depot and buy whatever chemicals they have and just spray like crazy. So inspired by love, yes. Guided by knowledge, no. So you have to balance the two. So when managing a property, before we're going to go in and start willy-nilly pulling or doing anything like that or spraying, we have to make sure that there are no desirable species present. And that might mean plant species, but it might also mean turtles, frogs, you name it. We have to be aware of what's there before we can approach it in a wise and respectful way. So the strategy that we've been doing since basically the 1930s is field surveys. So our conservation division in Westchester County spends several days a year, maybe 30 days a year in the field surveying our properties. Now, the old school way we used to do that was every time we found something, we would fill out one of these index cards, species, location, habitat, what it was feeding on. So we have a whole card catalog full of this stuff going back decades. Now, we've gotten with the times, so we have moved on to using something called iNaturalist. Has everybody here used iNaturalist? Fantastic. If you haven't, please download it. Then, once you have it downloaded, start going for walks in our county parks. Record everything you see. The more data we have, the better we can manage things. We have found new invasions of Tier 2 species by looking through iNaturalist records that community scientists like yourself are posting that we can then dedicate resources to. That is going to be invaluable in saving time for our department. And plus, it's a lot of fun. So there is a social component to this. Once I found iNaturalist, I got off Facebook, and I spend my time on this one. It's a great, free resource. There's another one called Seek. This is like the little brother of iNaturalist. This is great to do with kids. Kids can earn badges for observations. If you find 20 different lepidopterans, you get your butterfly badge and so on. It's amazing. It has real-time identification skills. So basically, you open the app, you activate your camera, you hold it over the creature, the plant that you want to identify, and it will put a pretty good identification on it. iNaturalist has that feature too. It's not so much real time. The advantage of iNaturalist, though, is other interested people around the world can confirm or deny your identification. Now, where this is really useful is for the homeowner. So not every homeowner can be an expert botanist. Not every botanist can be an expert botanist or mycologist. But using this, you can actually do a pretty good bio blitz of your property. All right? Take a nice sunny weekend, order some pizzas, serve some margaritas, get your friends over, do your own little bio blitz of your property. Now, once you have that record, it's saved in iNaturalist. You can go through it, look at each individual species. The ones that are not native are going to have an identifier on them, which I'll show you in a little bit. So, invaluable resource for a homeowner, municipality. This is how you can find out what you have. All right, there's one more too that I wanted to call out, and that's IMAP Invasives. This one's a little more geared for the professional, but it has, it's similar to iNaturalist, but dedicated for invasive species mapping and tracking. So fantastic one. I'll show everybody some pictures of what the interfaces and the results look like in a little bit. Okay, so you've surveyed, and you can follow that with research. You can do them in conjunction too, the 1 and 2 hand in hand. So you found an invasive, now what? So first question for a homeowner to ask is, okay, you have an invasive, how much of it is there? So personal example, at my home in Cold Spring, we had our sidewalk replaced. The Department of Transportation, I believe, when they completed the sidewalk, they had to backfill the soil along that new sidewalk, and within a couple months I had myla minute growing on my property. Yes, but assuming I didn't know what it was, I would still have iNat. I could see what that new plant is. I'd get that little non-native indicator on that. Then I can go to an organization or a website like lhprism.org. I can look up that species, find out how bad it is. The answer is really bad. So again, early detection, and I was able to, by pulling a half dozen stems, nip that problem in the bud. And that is the ideal model of how to do it. Now, when and how it should be tackled, so depending on the species you're confronting, there are going to be recommended strategies and things you should not do. So has everybody seen the movie The Sorcerer's Apprentice with Disney and Fantasia? So many of our invasive species, you cut them and you get 10 suckers replacing that one cut stump. So before you just jump in there with loppers, do that 30 seconds, 2 minutes of research, and you'll find that, okay, maybe you don't want to cut it. You should actually be grubbing it out and digging it out. So that's another question. As Matt said, you may need to go back to that site for 8 years, all right? Is that a fight you're willing to take? We'll talk about goal setting. That's really important when dealing with invasive species, but just keep in mind, it might not be a one-shot thing. So research your friend and other things, LH Prism partners. So can't thank LH Prism enough, but it is composed of member organizations, which you all know: T-Town, Greenberg Nature Center, Ryan Nature Center. It's going to be Mianus River Gorge. You name the nonprofit, the municipality nearby, they are part of this. Those organizations, those partners are going to be extremely well informed about this stuff, and they can be great resources for anybody who's got questions. We were shouting about spotted lanternfly years before we saw our first one, to the point where it was almost like Cassandra, where nobody believed us, or Henny Penny, Chicken Little, Sky is Falling. We know what we're talking about. We're just ahead of the curve, is what it is. Okay. And this is an example of the tier ranking list and assessment. You can get this off of the LH Prism website. Great resource. It is a little behind the curve. It's a document that is constantly being updated, so I do recommend checking back periodically. But this can also help you in your battle, your struggle. All right. Goal setting, super important. I have to confess, I did a stint in corporate world, and so I do occasionally use corporate jargon. SMART goal setting stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. And the staff that work with me when we do our assessments, they probably get sick of hearing about this, but it works. I was at the New York State Invasive Species Conference in Saratoga Springs this past September. And the keynote speaker had this great slide, which I could not find. I apologize, but basically it was the invasive species doom spiral. All right, and I'll just describe it for you. Where you find something, you gather, you muster all your volunteers, everybody's gung-ho, and then you spend a year trying to control it, and you do a pretty good job, and then the next year it's back. And every year the effort dwindles and dwindles until finally everybody gives up, and the next time there's an invasion, you're going to get fewer people to recruit. So defining your goals, making them achievable is essential. So, examples, and these are just things like one sentence elevator pitch that I can give to my boss saying, this is what I want to do. So, we have a picture of Phragmites here from Patricia Butter. And so, prevent the further spread of Phragmites at Laurel Lake, Mountain Lake Park, through spring and summer cutting below the water line before it sets seed, through 2025, at which point reevaluate to make sure that strategy is actually doing what we intended. Fishermen were happy with the strategy. They were able to cast into the lake much better than before. Is it eradication? Not at all. Is it prevention of spread? Possibly, but it is at least preventing seed set and spread. So limited goal, specific time, and reevaluated. For that yellow archangel one that I described before, eradicate approximately 500 square feet of yellow archangel at Silver Lake Preserve through use of foliar herbicide by fall 2024. Monitor and watch for reemergence through 2026. Treat accordingly. So specific, achievable, and timely. Set yourself a timeline. So this is something I recommend. The alternative could be something like if you have a 50-acre preserve and you say, we want to get rid of the Norway maple there, good luck. It's possible, which Hastings is making some serious inroads into their Norway maple problem at Hillside Woods, but it is an ambitious goal. All right. And implementation I'm going to save for the case studies, which are coming next. All right. So we're going to start with my nightmare, and that is beech leaf disease. So we saw that picture of the canopy that had opened up, and we saw a picture of the deer munching the natives and the Japanese stilt grass growing all over the place. So the disease is caused by a nematode that gets in the leaves. We found it in 2019. At that point, it was at Bronx River Parkway in Scarsdale. It was at the Levy Preserve, I believe. No, Westchester Wilderness Walk in Pound Ridge or Bedford, and later on we found it in marshlands. So we detected it early. We were able to figure out what it was, and after doing our research, we realized that we might be losing these beech trees within 10 years. At a minimum, we'd be losing a lot of the canopy, exposing the ground to sunlight that invasives could take over. So our action was, and this is an example of it, this is actually 3 years after detection. So what we wanted to do is get ahead of the curve by planting as much as we can. So first off, where were our beech stands? For this, we enlisted the help of all our different county parks. So each park had a staff person they sent to a training where they were able to identify beech leaf disease and able to, given a form where they were going to record locations that they saw it. Now, at this point, it wasn't the disease, it was just beech trees in general. So once we had an idea of where our beech stands were most dense, that's where we started to devote our energies. So this is an example of the importance of not really the control of the invasive. There is no cure for beech leaf disease yet. There's some experimental stuff. There's some treatments you can give to individual trees to try to hold the disease off, but on a landscape scale, it's going to be here. So our strategy was to fill that understory before the invasive species did. So in this case, we partnered with the U.S. Forest Service, Justin Bowers, Max Piana, and they partnered with us to do a study of oak regeneration in canopy gaps. So in this case, we have a fenced-in area about, I believe it was 100 meters by 100 meters. Maybe less than that, sorry. But we planted 400 oak seedlings in this area with the goal of closing that canopy gap as quickly as we can. Wildwoods Restoration, Linda Rolleder's project, has a different approach where they're using native herbaceous vegetation to seal that canopy gap simultaneous with tree planting. So that's something we're going to be looking into as well. Like Christy, we are using both bare root, container, and even ball and burlap when we can afford and actually get them out there. One of the challenges is if we can't protect those trees, they're goners. So while we can get a $1 bare root tree from the DEC seedling sale in Saratoga, it costs us about $4 to tube each individual tree, about the same to fence. So our costs are not in the plant stock, it's in protecting them from deer. We do not water. We do not have the ability to do backwoods watering. We don't have the staff. Therefore, it is kind of like tough love. We're planting them and we're hoping for the best. We have altered our planting schedule where we're doing more and more fall plantings. We'll order the bare roots, we'll heal them in or pot them up in spring, plant in the fall so that they get the fall rains, have a better chance of establishing through the spring and then getting through the following summer. And in order to get the information out as quick as possible, we were basically the bleeding edge of this disease in our area. So it started in Ohio about 12 years ago, did one of those jumps that Matt talked about where it ended up in Long Island and Westchester. So we were basically the first in the area to react to this threat. Even to some extent before the DEC, because it hadn't yet reached their offices in New Paltz and beyond. We were seeing it firsthand, and since then, we've now seen it jump to Maine, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. It's spread like wildfire. So for us to get our strategies out, strategies for erecting deer exclosures, for even providing materials through a grant, we formed something called the Beech Leaf Disease Coalition. The members are there: Mianus River Gorge, Teatown, Westchester Land Trust, Hudson Highlands Land Trust, North Salem Open Land Foundation, to try to spread this information as quickly as possible so that others don't have to learn to rebuild the wheel. All right, so that's beech leaf disease. We've planted thousands of trees. We need more volunteers. So if anybody's interested, and if there's anybody from the Westchester Parks Foundation here, we'll try to put you together. Corydalus incisa, again, this is that purple keman, that one with that nice purple flower. This is a really good example. So there was a paper written by Daniel Atha of New York Botanical Garden, and Jess Schuler, I believe, was one of the co-authors. She's at Lasden Arboretum. So they detected this plant. I can't remember if it was an escapee from NYBG, but it was found just upriver in Mount Vernon along the Bronx River. Bronx River flows through NYBG, the Bronx River flows through Mount Vernon, the Bronx River flows through Scarsdale. One really interesting thing about this plant is it seems to have traveled upriver. Now, mostly into floodplains, so perhaps flood event, the seeds, the little rhizomes might have floated upstream. We're not sure, but by looking at iNaturalist, right there, we can see every other recorded observation of it. Now, using this plus boots on the ground knowledge from Suzanne Nolan, Bronx River Parkway Conservancy, we were able to find a second population over at Nature Study Woods in New Rochelle. So for the past 5 years, every spring, there's been a large pull of Corydalus incisa. Oh, sorry, one other thing. When you create your iNaturalist observation, if you see that red exclamation point, that's a sign that maybe you want to do your research on that one, because that is not a native plant. Okay, so looking at PRISM, we were able to see their regional map, so pretty much limited to Westchester County with small population up there. I don't actually know which one that one is. All right, so it's a tier 2 emerging invasive. It's an annual plant. So the strategy for this guy is going to be manual control and pulling. And so for the past 5 years, that is exactly what we've done. That's Ryan McLean from the Invasive Strike Force. And we collected 60 pounds or so of this plant. These are little tiny plants that weigh grams. So we collected bunches and bunches. And this effort has been repeated for 5 years now and counting. We've slowed it down. Hasn't gotten rid of it completely, but we're hopeful that we're at least preventing the spread of this one. Now, hand in hand with the actual control, we have to focus on education too, because this jumped into a couple of people's backyards nearby. So we want to talk to those landowners. Somebody reported it that they saw at a plant swap in New Rochelle. Somebody was giving this away. So education, extremely important too. And again, Lower Hudson PRISM, fantastic organization. I'm not getting a commission or anything for every time I say that. By the way, this is not product placement. They are that good, though. Okay. Water chestnut. Now, water chestnut, everybody familiar with this guy? Yeah, so this is a tier 3. It's established. It's not in every water body. It's not widespread, but it is established. You can see a photo here where it's doing its thing. It will blanket an entire water body, make it look from an aerial photo like a golf green. Now, it's a tough plant. Ordinarily, this is not one that we would try to ram our heads against. However, through the Westchester Parks Foundation, they had a corporate donor that was willing to rent a mechanical harvester. Now, that paired with their ability to muster volunteers made this one something that was worth a shot. So if we look at, this is IMAP invasives, we can see there are populations right there at Tibbetts Brook Park. This is Van Cortlandt Manor. So Christy, we're doing our best to keep this from flowing down your way. Other populations at Reservoir 1 and 2, this is Twin Lakes. And further up north at Blue Mountain Park. Now, the Westchester Parks Foundation mustered their volunteers. I loaned canoes, and they spent hours and hours hand pulling this plant. Okay, so there they are hard at work. They load up the canoe, they dump it out on the shore. This thing is brought far enough from water where it's not going to be a risk to go back into it, and it will just cook itself. Okay, and the end result? There we go. So they've made a huge dent in that population, and this is something they've repeated year after year. This has also been paired with a lake management plan from Princeton Hydro to hopefully reduce some of the nutrient runoff that may be accelerating the growth of this guy. So another case study. All right. A couple more quick. Spotted lanternfly. So this is an invasive plant conference, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this one. However, it does tie in closely to Tree of Heaven Ailanthus. So this is one of those ones that we've been watching for years, waiting for it to arrive. The scouts of the lanternfly arrived about 2 years ago. Last year we had our first big year in southern Westchester. It's going to be worse this year. Everybody, those of us in northern Westchester, we're not going to be safe. It is coming. So this is the nymph stage. We'll be seeing this in a couple months. And then later in the summer, we'll get the adults. Everybody should be familiar with this if they're not already. And this is what it looked like. This is iNaturalist. We can see observations. This is, I believe, 2021, where we don't really have any observations in Westchester County. This red wave has now come up to here, so I think White Plains was pretty badly hit, and it's working north. So because we had time to prepare for this, there have been a few things that we've done. Now, first off, our goal is not eradication. Pennsylvania couldn't do it. New Jersey couldn't do it. Westchester's fantastic. We're like the Spartans, 300 to 1, but we're not that good. We knew we were not going to be able to eradicate this thing get rid of it completely, Christy. But we're going to do our best to minimize its impact on both agricultural areas, but also heavy cultural use areas. Meaning your picnic pavilion. I was having a slice of pizza, I had the box open on my lap, and one of these lanternflies fell in. Now, that kind of experience can turn off our patrons, understandably. So we focus our efforts on controlling population numbers and preventing the egg laying in those areas. Swimming pools, you don't want to swim with the film of lanternflies floating on top. Picnic areas, Lasden Arboretum, where they have valuable cultural plantings, ornamental plantings. So our methods of doing this, the Ghostbusters thing, I use my 15 minutes of fame on News 12 with this thing. So basically we use these cordless backpack vacuums. They extend about 10 feet with your arm, and you can suck the adults off trees. Now each female that you take off is going to decrease the number of lanternflies by 50 to 100 the following year. So by collecting as many as we can in those high target areas, we can hopefully maintain our user experiences. Is it a threat to our native plants? So they're not really documenting much tree mortality from these guys. They will feed on grapes, they'll reduce fruit production, but ailanthus is their preferred host. This is an ailanthus that I'm working on. By the way, ailanthus, fascinating backstory. This is one of those ones, everybody knows Tree of Heaven, ailanthus, smooth, tannish, gray bark, compound leaves. When you break it or scratch it, it smells like rotten peanut butter. This was an intentional introduction back in the 1900s. There's a book called Urban Forest by Jill Johns where she tells the story of this. So imagine you're a resident of New York City at the turn of the century. There's no air conditioning. Those summers were really hot. You wanted shade trees. You wanted your windows wide open. What you did not want are bugs flying onto you while you sleep. So they thought it would be a great idea to use this Asian species that does not host our native insects to plant those in our urban areas to create shade without the insect problem. All right. Now, 100 years later, the insects found them, and that's why we're getting the spotted lanternfly. But just an example of how these introductions sometimes take place. So by vacuuming off the lanternflies, that is an example of a full canister that is hundreds and hundreds of lanternflies, and this was done day after day after day. We're able to reduce the number. Now, Westchester County, through Peter McCart's help, we were able to purchase additional vacuums that we were able to distribute to different municipalities so they can duplicate the efforts. Okay, and time? Almost done. So just one last example of how you can do this at home. So survey your property, as I discussed, iNaturalist, seek. All right, find out what you have. When you get one that has that, that means take a closer look. In this case, calorie pair. This is in the backyard of my office. So calorie pair, I do my research next. So invasive.org is a useful website. Again, LH Prism website as well. And I'm able to see that this is an aggressive invasive. It gets wild from ornamental plantings. The wild ones will form dense stands like that down there. It is spread by birds eating the fruit. So this is one that we wanted to get rid of as quick as we could. All right. Prioritize and plan. In this case, it's a single plant. That is the ideal situation for you as well. If you have one, not a problem. You can dig it out if it's small enough. What else is there? Is there going to be some sensitive species that's using it or that it's adjacent to? Are there other species that are going to be a higher priority? If I had 100 stems of this and only 2 stems of something like Taringo crabapple, that becomes my priority. Before I jump into the big fight with this one, I deal with the problem that I can. Chemical use is a big topic. Don't want to get too much into that. In Westchester County, we work with the Pesticide Management Committee. Before we do any spraying, we get approval from that committee. We are not looking to spray, but sometimes it's really the only way to reasonably control stuff. Okay. And then implement, so pulling parties, as I suggested, you know, if you have those high school students that knock on your door after every snowstorm looking to shovel your property, get their phone numbers or have them come back in the summer and put them to work doing that. If you have your own kids, you can pay them a nickel per stem or $1 per pound, whatever you want. Recruit friends, recruit help. Municipalities, there are going to be people in every municipality that are just looking for the guidance and leadership to actually get this done. All right, and one last thing and then I'm done. Goal, one sentence goal. Preservation of healthy, diverse ecosystems through prevention and mitigation of invasive species impacts. Okay, so it's important to remember why we're doing this, all right? We're gonna be spending hundreds of hours, sweat, blood in cases of some plants. So why are we doing this? So here's an example. This is a park in Westchester County. Now, you'll notice we have Phragmites, all that yellow giant reed right there, okay? We also have these little hummocks all over the center and on the perimeter. Now, the Phragmites is encroaching on these hummocks. These hummocks are some of the most diverse habitats we have left in the county. So one of the ways we assess this is something called species richness. So basically, if you put down a meter square, count the number of different species that are growing in that meter square. In most places in Westchester County, if you exclude the invasive species, you might be looking at a half dozen species. That's actually not bad. On these hummocks, we're in the 20s. They are rich. These hummocks are not accessible by people. They've been kind of isolated from invasive species. They are fantastic. We find cranberries growing on them. We find orchids growing on them. We find sundews like this growing on them. Hard to see, but the sundew here is actually eating a crane fly. Pretty cool. So this is what we want to preserve as much as we can. I'm going to go back a couple because in order to make this done, it's a challenge. Phragmites is a real beast to fight. It's in New York City watershed land. It's not an area we want to spray chemicals. So through the help, again, of the Soil and Water Conservation District, we are commissioning an invasive species management plan to try to figure out how to preserve that rare habitat from that invasive. But that's the goal. We want Westchester to be diverse for our children. We want it to be home for as many different species of plant and animal as we can. It enriches all of our lives. They have their own right to exist. And I have to remind myself that this is really what we're trying to do when we're fighting invasive species. So with that, I will end, and questions or as a group question? Cool.
Okay, so if our presenters can come on up, we'll do questions from the audience for the whole group. So you can sit down at the dais. Did you? Yeah. So go on up, guys. Some of you will be sitting.
Thanks.
They don't want to sit on the.
That wasn't a joke. If anybody wants a job this summer, we'll pay you. We have internships for all sorts of conservation work. We have summer camps where you can teach kids.
And we have a roaming mic, so Hillary has it. So if there are any questions.
Hi. I was involved in a school garden for about 17 years. And about the last 10 years, there was a small stream along the garden, and knotweed developed. And we tried for years and years and years to get rid of it. And I was just wondering if you had any. The final straw was my son came with a pickaxe and actually hacked away at those gigantic roots, and that seemed to help some of them. But it sort of took over the garden, and I'm just wondering if you had any suggestions on that. Thank you.
I think that question is for you all.
For us. Did you have knotweed at your site?
It's just starting, so.
Oh, then you need to learn from this. Is this on? We've taken on knotweed in New York City in patches, like along the Bronx River, but because of its both super challenging root structure, rhizomatous growth, and ability to recolonize, it really is one of the toughest invasives, I would say. We have had some success in small cases using injection of pesticide, where it's incredibly labor intensive. You first weaken the plant by cutting it, and then go back and inject a very small quantity of herbicide directly into the stem. But it depends on the size of the area and how well that works. There was a study, I don't know if it was ever published, many years ago, about various effectiveness of different techniques like grubbing versus spraying versus cutting. And I feel like the grubbing was like a little bit too much disturbance for it to justify the outcome as compared to cutting. So repeat cutting, I think, would be preferred over grubbing, depending on the habitat and how much you're willing to disturb it. But injection is a different approach.
For Westchester County, at a few locations. Is this one on? Better? Yeah. Okay. So cutting, the goal is not eradication or removal. It is just to control spread. So we do a cutting regime of Memorial Day, July 4th, Labor Day, and make that our routine. We can put it on the calendar every year, and it keeps it in check. Correct.
Have another question over here. One thing before we continue with the questions. Our panelists have very generously offered to stay a little later, so we will be running the Q&A till about 10 of 1 or so for those of you who can stay late as well.
Hi. Does Westchester County have a location where residents can dispose of the invasives that they are pulling out of their gardens? Because you wouldn't want to put it with the other yard waste, correct?
That's correct. I do not know of a location where you can drop it. I do know... Oh, it's still on? Okay. So depending on the species and the time you cut it, you can just put it in black plastic and dispose of it as normal. If it's going to seed, that's when you have to be extra careful. I've also heard of a technique that I'd be curious if anybody else has tried, where you basically fill a 55-gallon drum half full with water, and you submerge all the invasives that you pull in there, and it basically just turns to a slurry. That will not work with stuff that's in seed, perhaps, but for herbaceous material, that may work.
On the same topic, but also we have fields of it in Scarsdale. Is there something that could be planted that would? Is there something that could be planted that could compete with Japanese knotweed and mugwort?
Oh yeah. It's so tough, and again, it depends on the habitat. In a riparian area, if you can get any live stakes going of aggressive, like willow or poplar species, that's an option. Those have a very low success rate, so you kind of want to overplant and then expect that a bunch of them don't make it. In more upland settings, I think there are some some herbaceous, geez, that can compete pretty well, like you were just mentioning Rudbeckia, Black-Eyed Susan, and related. I mean, I really like white snake root and its dominance in a tough area. Like, I don't know, I don't think people plant that much, but yeah, some of our really tough natives that can compete. But again, the physical structure of knotweed, like the roots, it's very tough. So try the woodies, I think, might be your best bet.
can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, I live in New Rochelle and right near Glenwood Lake. We've been working hard with Westchester Land Trust over a couple of years, restoring a large piece of property there, and it's infested with knotweed. And our success has been in sort of accepting it and managing it. And one thing that has worked for us is planting trees. And we have them, we're recreating a canopy. We're still working hard at removing it, and I'm wondering about what you think about the window, like the proper time to do that, because what we had been doing in the past was removing them when they're tiny little sprouts, but I'm hearing that it's actually better to let them grow a bit more, and that there's apparently a specific window. Do you guys just not follow that? Do you just cut it when you see it, or?
Right application? Oh.
No, I mean for cutting.
Cutting is fine when it's young. I mean, yeah, you might have to do it multiple times a year, like Tara said, but yeah, definitely for pesticide, the windows get very specific because you want biomass, but not too much, but not so little. Anyway, but for cutting, I'd say early and often.
So I'll just add that the theory is that, you know, one of the problems is the stored energy in the root mass, right? So you're trying to dwindle down the stored energy in the root mass. So theoretically, if you let it grow a little bit more, you have expended some of that root mass, stored sugars, and then you're cutting more of it, right? I think in practice and in practicality, you're way better off having a regime, as Taro said, where you're cutting 3 times a year at whatever time it is that you can set those 3 times a year of cutting, absolutely before it seeds, and that you're just consistent with it, and you commit to, 5 to 10 years of cutting. You will eventually wear out the root mass, but like I said, theoretically, yes, you can start tweaking it to use more of that stored sugar.
2 cutting questions that I think are quick answers. Buckthorn, what time of year to cut that?
It's not really worth cutting, but if you're going to cut it, it's going to be in the spring. But it resprouts very aggressively.
Is that coming to Westchester?
It's in Westchester. There are locations in Westchester with glossy buckthorn. I haven't seen the regular buckthorn yet, but I've definitely seen glossy buckthorn. It just hasn't become invasive yet, well, it hasn't become widespread yet.
Yeah. And how do you cut Phragmite below the water? Do you have a waterproof blade trimmer?
So years ago, it was me and a pocket knife and some waders. I don't recommend that. A hedge cutter with an extension works pretty well, so that would be my suggestion.
Have you heard about bristly locusts for the competing with Japanese knotweed?
No.
No? Okay.
Hi. So under herbivory and I think mostly of like rehabilitating emergent wetland systems, nobody's mentioned anything about Canada goose. Is that not a problem anymore, or especially with plugs? Have we got a good recipe? Is that why they're no longer here, or?
Canada goose are everywhere. I mean, in New York City, they're primarily managed as flight hazards, like hazards to airplanes. So we work with the Port Authority to allow them access to our property to addle eggs from their nests around now, basically. And then once they're around, I mean, we find in the city that they primarily focus on lawns. That's where they like to hang out most of all. We haven't had them in emergent wetlands that I've seen. I think. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Salt marshes, we do install herbivory fencing. All the little string with the flags that flutter, we need to keep our salt marsh fencing, herbivory fencing in for like 2 to 4 years after planting. Sorry. Emergent wetland, I was imagining, something else.
Hi, I have Two quick questions. I work for county parks, and I'm wondering if there's a way that, in response to the Westchester residents question, if there's a way that we could collect pulled invasives at the county's recycling facility. The composter there has a lot of experience in essentially cooking invasives into compost. So I'm wondering if there's any way we could get that going. And for the students from Rye, you guys mentioned that you're working on finding out the best ways to get other students involved and like what sparks their interest or not, and you've grown your club so significantly. I'm wondering if you would be able to share with county parks and other organizations how you've gotten all this interest from other students, and once you kind of experiment with what method works best, if there's a way for you to share that with us old folks, essentially.
So what we found really helpful for at least our student body was advertising community service, since for many students I know it is a graduation requirement. And I think because of its location, just having the students see us working out there every week, that has also been helpful. I don't know, do you want to add?
I mean, we have gone into younger classes and, you know, talked to them about the significance of our work and how they can get involved. And we've had some success with that. And I think our biggest problem is getting more younger students to come work with us, because we're all seniors, so we're going to be graduating, and there's not as many people that are involved.
Composting, I think it's a great idea. If Peter McCart is still here, we should find him and talk to him.
I also heard NYBG was starting to do composting of Phragmites. I haven't seen it, but I heard about it, and I personally, this is a topic I'm really interested in. We bag and dispose of a lot of Mylaminate every summer in black plastic bags, and it just feels so wrong. So,
can I do a quick follow-up for the students? Have you guys, do you all use social media for outreach for the club, or have you mostly relied on traditional like flyers and things like that? I'm just curious about that.
Yes, we do have a social media account. I think within our school, just because of the sheer number of clubs who all have social media accounts, it's been a little competitive per se with our social media accounts. But definitely keeping students updated on it social media has been a helpful tool with that as well.
And do you find that people respond more to in person and the paper, or to the social media stuff?
Yeah, I think the most effective has been seeing us working there just in person themselves versus something like a poster in a hallway or something like that. But I do think for students, if you're trying to advertise to students who may not be like close location to you, so where they can't see you every week, I think social media is probably better than something like a poster.
Two quick questions, please. One is, I've noticed, I think it's either lesser or greater celandine, the yellow one that looks like marsh marigold but isn't. It will be all over along the Bronx River Parkway very shortly. I have now noticed it in a very dry traffic triangle that I take care of as a volunteer, where I never would have thought it, because it's not moist there. Now I know we've had some wet springs, but I'm wondering, should we just leave it where it is? Is it worth dealing with? That's question number one. Question number two is, walking from the parking lot of the county center to the county center, I walked through the area that was renovated about 15 years ago with spectacular plantings, lots of serviceberry. About 8 years ago I was there, a whole flock of cedar waxwing were eating the serviceberries. It was spectacular. They are being taken over by porcelainberry as we speak, and I would like to put a plea in. It was a spectacular renovation and plantings. If you need volunteers, let us know. There are a lot of us here, but let's protect that project. Thank you.
Anyone have an answer to the celandine question?
No.
Just a technique that the Pound Ridge Land Conservancy is trying out. So in areas where that is the only plant growing, they are digging and sifting, trying to get out those little nodules. Okay, so Pound Ridge Land Conservancy is trying a technique where it is the only plant present, where they'll dig out the top inch of soil, run it through a sifter, get rid of all those little bulbits, and then basically seed after that. Now, when it's growing with desirable natives, though, that becomes really challenging. I've worked with volunteers with teaspoons and just popping them out individually. It's a lot of work, and the goal has to be really modest with that one.
Planted tons of young natives. There's a ton of mugwort. Like, we planted last year. But what's the best way to tackle it?
We mow around the plants we plant. Just keep the mugwort down. I mean, and allow the plants to get taller. Did you plant woodies?
It's
a mix. Yeah. I mean, we don't really pull much, but usually because we're trying to cover a really large area, so using a hedge trimmer or a string trimmer is more expedient. But I think you just got to get it down and then let the other plants take over.
And we've also had this problem. We pulled out a bunch of mugwort and then we smothered that with cardboard, and we cut holes in the cardboard for the young native plants, and that's really worked for us.
Yeah, great.
I just wanted to give people advice about Japanese knotweed. It's one of the most delicious invasives. If you've never barbecued young Japanese knotweed, you can have a pulling party and a barbecue party and get rid of a lot of it that way. And garlic mustard, pesto, yeah, exactly.
Only in the spring, though. It gets woody, and there is some evidence that it's a little bit poisonous later on in the season.
Sorry, guys. I have a question for Matt, which is about kudzu, and would it possibly be used where there's a lot of nitrogen runoff? Could we actually think of it as a friend, as Taro likes to say?
No, not for that one. I mean, honestly, for something like nitrogen runoff, I would be much more inclined to let the Phragmites go. And again, it's all about what you're trying to manage and your priorities. But there's almost no circumstance in which kudzu is good. But it's a good idea of like, well, phytoremediation is a technique to take care of nitrogen or phosphorus pollution. And I think Eric Kiviat at Hudsonia has done a fair bit of work that shows that Phragmites serves a really good purpose for phytoremediation in some cases. So, yeah.
In that specific project where you showed the picture of the guy clearing the knotweed, what method was he using?
He was just cutting it like with loppers. Yeah.
Thanks for a great presentation today from all the panelists. I had a question relating to the beech trees. Has there been any consideration of like removing the ones that are already infected, or is it more just kind of wait for them to expire and kind of plant and to get ahead of it, or is it worth considering removal ahead of time?
So that's not recommended. I think one of the lessons learned from chestnut and elm was if you remove them, you're also removing any that may have resistance that you can then cultivate. So at least for ash trees, removal ahead of the insect is not recommended, only if they are within fall distance of a high traffic area. So there's a project called MAMA, which is Search for Lingering Ash Trees, with the intent of propagating. And we're starting to think that for beech trees, we might need a similar program, find ones that are resistant, and then use them to repopulate later on.
Yeah, I'll just add to that a little bit. I mean, one of the things about beech leaf disease, it's still not entirely clear, correct me if I'm wrong, Taro, but it's still not entirely clear what is causing BLD. They think it's the nematode that's getting into the leaves. They don't actually know exactly what's transmitting the nematode. So when you think about these scenarios where there's still a lot of unknowns, as Tara pointed out, preventive cutting tends to just cause damage to the populations. Ash is a great example. Preemptively cutting ash did nothing to slow down the emerald ash borer. On the other hand, southern pine beetle, preventatively cutting pine did slow down the southern pine beetle, and you could look at stands in the Pine Barrens of Long Island where they did and didn't cut preemptively. Where they did cut preemptively had much more success in preventing southern pine beetle. So you have to know a lot about the biology and the ecology of the system in order to make that decision. Sometimes you just try it and see what happens. That's what the Forest Service is for sometimes. But in this particular case, there's probably not an advantage to preemptive cutting.
Hi, thank you everyone for this really fantastic morning and how inspiring it is, how many people are interested in this topic, and it's exciting to see all the energy. My question is about soil. Like your example, Tara, where the DOT infilled with mile-a-minute infested soil. We have a park in Hastings which was renovated, and much to their chagrin, it sprouted back all of these invasive species, including five-leaf Aurelia. So is there any effort or possibility of, people who purvey soil, nurseries that sell soil, is there any way that you guys have considered or know about to kind of sanitize soil better? I know if you sterilize it, then you're killing everything, and that's not healthy for soil, but I just wondered about your thoughts on that.
There are some tests. You can do tests for weed seed, but it's like expensive and you might not catch everything. We do have that as a provision in some of our soil placement work, but also in New York City, I'll say when we do soil placement, we try to use glacial till or dredge soil from deep down, like for, say, a large construction project where they're digging out a foundation, you get the soil that's too deep to have a seed bank in it. That's one approach that has become the norm in New York City.
I had a question regarding when you're doing a replanting or mitigation program and you get all your plant material, and some of it are scions or larger whips or even some of the balm burlap stuff. And as you're coming along, you might find some oak tree acorn sprouted and growing. Sometimes when I'm doing that, I think, why am I planting these things? I'm not even sure this is the best place, but this beautiful seed that's already sprouted and doing well, just waiting for the right conditions. I mean, should we be trying to protect that more, or what do you have any strategy when you come across some of those things that are naturally growing?
I feel like I'm talking too much.
I'm going to talk from a theoretical perspective and then let the practitioners talk. Just remember, everything you plant, like the survival rate of a population is about 1, right? So for every individual, there's 1 replicate for a stable population. You're planting hundreds or thousands, most of them are going to die. If you kill 1 oak tree in the process of replanting 10, I think that's fine. I think you have to take it from that lens. Otherwise, you're going to get crippled by what the potentialities are for, the site that you're looking at. That's just my view from a population ecology perspective, and now I'll let the practitioners actually talk.
Bring up a couple of scenarios. One is that in our research in New York City, we've seen that seedling recruitment is maybe okay, but then that little oak tree might not make it to sapling or mid-story stage. So don't think it's a sure thing, I guess, just because it's sprouting. It's not, and planting is always a good idea. I think maybe hopefully from Max and them's research, we learn more about why oaks are not regenerating in the way they should be in this area. There's also been interesting research on that out of Black Rock Forest. But anyway, oaks are struggling, and it might not be from the sprout. It might not be at the ability to sprout. It might be later on. And then I'll say that, we would love to not have to plant, but it's just not feasible. Even invasive species aside, trampling is a concern. We want to create native plant density as quickly as possible, and protecting that one little acorn is just, anyway, it feels like we can do something more quickly and then move on and hit cover more ground, you know. So, but we do look at what's growing in an area and like use that to supplement our plant palette, you know, look at what's doing well, what seems to be thriving. So we're definitely paying attention to that stuff, but it certainly doesn't prevent us from planting.
To be overly poetic, when you're doing restoration, you're building the stage and the actors come later, and you don't really have much to say about that, but you're building the stage, and that's really what you should think about.
Yeah, we use that Field of Dreams line a lot. Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're talking about birds and stuff, you know, when we say that, but yeah.
Okay. Oh, are they done? Oh, the highways in Westchester County, they're really covered with vines, and they even look like they're killing all the trees. Is there any way to address this to the New York State Department of Transportation? Because I hear that they're the people in charge of that.
Good question.
I'll go with the county employee.
So if you remember the slide I had with the number of acres and the number of staff, New York State DOT is in a similar boat. They are aware of it. In many cases, we're reliant on volunteers. So we have Bob Del Tordo, who's the vine cutting squad from the Bronx River Parkway. I believe there's similar efforts. Right. So, yeah, I can't speak for the state, but I do know they have some constraints as well. I sympathize with them, but yeah, there's no easy answer.
I'm like right there with you, though. I mean, the cost of cleaning up a tree that falls on the parkway and the time wasted by traffic, et cetera, those vines are going to pull those trees down. And we have the same problem in New York City, but maybe less so. It seems like all of our highways are constantly under construction, so nothing's growing there anyway. But like I've seen this on the parkways, and I always worry because, you know, the weight of those vines, those trees are very tall, and in a storm, if they fall on the parkway, that's a bigger problem to manage. So anyway, just solidarity, I feel like that is a real issue I've witnessed.
I had a big voice, but I guess. I was just saying MTA, I think Westchester is very much railroad centric, and the Black Lantern is all along the railroad. I was on the train, one was in the train, but there are posters, so I have to congratulate you guys about the posters that people are like, that's that bad bug. So continue that, I think that's a good thing. But also picking up litter too, talk about on the highways. I think we need that campaign again about don't be a litter bug. And then my last thing, so congratulations, we can keep that going. But for the kids, I'm so impressed with you. I'm just like floored. And I think your candy stuff, you know, as an oldie, it's so inspiring seeing that, but I think your candy selling should be like Girl Scout cookies. Like, we should be doing that, and that should be the next thing. Instead of selling Girl Scout cookies, we should be selling chocolates for the environment. So, well done.
Thank you, everybody. Just to piggyback on the selling idea, and I'm not a sales rep for Black & Decker, but this past summer when Taro had said, you know, he had a limited number of those vacuuming backpacks, we just went out and got a Black & Decker handheld plug-in rechargeable, and we were able to collect a good many spotted lanternfly at a various number of places that we knew needed help. So highly recommend that. And kids love using those, you know. The other thing, Christy, I had a question for early on in your presentation. You had a slide that said something like a new native plant list was being legislated, and I didn't know what you meant by legislated.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. Yeah, so there is a native species planting law in New York City. It's not super powerful, but it basically dictates that in the areas identified as forever wild, like I showed, that whole thing, the City Parks Department, us, we have to plant native species there. So it's kind of was legislating something we're already doing, but that attention is always welcome. So anyway, that law was maybe maybe, I don't know, several years ago, let's say 2015, I don't know. But the other thing that the law mandates is a regular creation of the native species planting guide to share with the public to use on their private property or on their own accord. So, and this will be the 3rd edition of that that's coming out this year. I can't remember if we do it every 2 years or every 3 years. I feel like it's every 3 years. So a new one will be coming out this summer.
It does have a native plant ordinance as well, so it was, I believe, an executive order from several years ago, thanks in large part to the Native Plant Center's advocacy. So plantings done in county parks are native, with a few exceptions for, I believe, annual ornamental stuff and arboretum.
Two or three comments. One, as to the invasive vines that are on the DOT highways. The way to hammer away at that is to contact our elected officials, assembly members, state senators, and if enough people bother them, perhaps they'll pay attention. Number two, as to the vines that are attacking the project out in the parking lot, I noticed that on the way in as well, and I will be contacting the powers that be in the parks to do a cleanup and a vine cutting. If you go to our vinecutter.com website soon, you'll probably see that we're gonna do something about that. Third thing, and then I'll let somebody else speak. As to the knotweed, we have an Eagle Scout that is going to do doing a knotweed remediation project, and it's an experiment that was done fairly successful in Vermont in the past couple of years by building screens with 1/2-inch hardware cloth and lying it over the knotweed stands. And the idea is that the knotweed will grow through the screen, and once it becomes larger than 1/2 inch, it will girdle the plant. So the knotweed is about to start growing, and we're looking to see to what extent that particular project will be successful, and if so, we'll try to repeat it. Thank you.
Can I make a quick addition to the highway stuff? You know, just from experience working with culverts, the things that go under roads and move water, I will say another approach, and I agree with Bob about contacting our local officials and our elected officials is really key. Another approach is to figure out how to overlap our environmental priorities with other priorities. The priority of DOT is to maintain the roads, right? That is that is your primary priority. The priority in installing culverts, as an example, or upgrading culverts, is to move water so it doesn't flood roads. Now, culverts also act as habitat connectors. To overlap our environmental priorities with our infrastructure priorities, we can figure out which culverts are best at connecting habitats. To overlap our priorities here, we can figure out what areas of the highway are most in need of vine cutting. We're not going to be able to cut every single linear mile or meter, if you're a scientist, of highway. Right? We're not going to be able to manage that. We've talked about priorities a lot here. But how can you overlap environmental priorities with the mission priorities of those organizations? And I think it's not, we could disagree as to whether or not it's the DOT's job to figure out those overlaps. But what I will say is it's entirely possible with educated nonprofits and academic institutions and municipal organizations to figure out those overlaps and help point them out. And that goes a long way. So
So I noticed that a lot of the trees that are being planted are deciduous trees. What about evergreen trees?
Evergreens a lot. We plant lots of different pines, especially in our coastal habitats. We plant juniper, eastern red cedar. Oh yeah, holly. Holly is considered rare in New York City, so we're really careful about when and where we plant it, and where the seed material comes from. Yeah, we do plant evergreens. It's, you know, I think they are one component of our forest ecosystems, and right plant, right place, you know? So yeah, they probably total like less than 15 or 20% of what we plant.
Do you plant any Norway spruce, which is considered naturalized in New York State?
No, we're pretty strict about, yeah, like true native to New York City, and yeah, we don't plant that one. Do you guys?
Norway spruce, there are CCC plantations from the 1930s in Pound Ridge, and they are spreading aggressively. So that is pretty much the only conifer that is naturally regenerating up there. Sorry, white pine as well. So no to Norway spruce. The other thing is the climate change atlas that Matt had the link to is showing that the forecast for white spruce and blue spruce in New York is not good at all. We're not planting hemlock, although perhaps with biocontrols that might be an option in the future. So really we're pretty limited to just about white pine and perhaps cedars.
So we're wrapping it up now. I just want to thank Matt, Taro, Christy, our high school students. Oh, thank you. This has been a labor of love for me. So many people around the county over the last year or two have been saying we need to do something like what we did today. So I'm so glad that we were able to do it and that you all were able to join us with your expertise and knowledge. And it's really been a wonderful experience, super inspirational. Thank you all. And we're only, 20 minutes late.